Hey, what's going on, everybody? What is going on? Today we're gonna have a different show, man. Today we're gonna try to have audience participation in a big way. So again, we're gonna be talking about idealism, materialism, or physicalism, as it's known, and just trying to get some feedback from from the audience, and hopefully, you guys will be able to do that. Otherwise, it'll be a really short show. Because materialism is dead, you just haven't realized it yet. That's the claim I'm going to make. So, we want to get your thoughts on the matter. And, materialism is the idea that fundamentally everything that's real or that exists is made out of matter. That's materialism. Idealism, on the other hand, is that everything is fundamentally mental, and that the material world, the world that we call the physical world, is an appearance. So it's kind of more of a mental category of reality, how a perception. And the problem is, though, because science uses methodological naturalism or materialism, and so we can actually measure, make predictions, and do a lot of things that actually function and work based on methodological materialism. But what a lot of people don't really understand is that science does not make any sort of metaphysical claims or ontological claims about what is. It's simply describing the universe, describing the behaviors, describing the patterns, trying to make predictions. And when those predictions can work and they are fulfilled, so to speak, then these become our theories. The theory of a model, like say the Big Bang, we have you know, background, cosmic background radiation, which was predicted by the Big Bang model. And because we see cosmic background radiation, then this counts as evidence for the model. That's how it works. That's how science works, and it's gotten us to the point where we can do live streams. We have essentially we build stuff out of minerals and rocks in the ground. Yet these rocks and minerals in the ground, this matter, is intelligent. Somehow we've combined all of these rocks to create microchips, which led to Chat GPT, for example, or other AI tools or computers or whatever it is that you want to talk about, all made out of rocks. How can rocks become intelligent? By combining them in certain ways. Well, there's something inherent about our reality that allows consciousness to express as an experience, as a projection of what's perceived. This is generally accepted by both materialists and idealists, and panpsychists and other people, theists, people like that. So, my claim is that materialism doesn't sufficiently explain all of this. It doesn't explain how intelligence can come from rocks. It doesn't explain how a conscious experience can come from combining neurons or things of this nature in just the right way for that to happen. You know, that it must be, inherent within the matter. So that's the claim by the panpsychists to get around the issue, is to say, well, you know, with a little bit of matter, there's a little proto consciousness. And if you combine everything in the right ways, then the consciousness can evolve or can go up in the spectrum. But I tend to look at it like the way that I'm understanding consciousness as a very basic phenomenon. Like, I'm sure if you combine matter in just the right way, intelligence can increase. We've seen that through our technology. But consciousness is simply the experience of doing all that thinking and processing of information. So it's kind of like there's no real range, there just is awareness. This conscious awareness just is. And the quality of that awareness depends on the kind of system that the consciousness is expressing itself out of. The consciousness of a bat, or the consciousness of an ant, or the consciousness of a human may all be different. We even see this among humans. Some humans don't see in color. Some humans don't know what it's like to experience certain things because their bodies won't allow for it. The overall system will not allow for a conscious experience of certain things. I'll never know what it's like to dunk a basketball as a 7 foot tall person because I'm not that person. And that's kind of the nature of experience, that it really is filtered. It's filtered through the system. It's expressed through the kind of observer it is. That's my own understanding. And I don't think it's that controversial. It's just that I explain it by idealism, that consciousness is fundamental, that there's always this phenomenon that's always fundamentally existing as that phenomenon, right? And so it gets expressed based on the kind of system you are. Okay. Possibly we have AI chatbots or AI robots or what have you that have some sort of experience of what it's like to process information the way it does. Possibly. Does this Is this consistent with materialism? Yeah, because materialism predicts that should be able to happen. The problem is in grounding. It's hard to philosophically or metaphysically ground that fact because we have so many different problems, called the hard problem of consciousness. On materialism, there's a hard problem of consciousness to explain, why there's any experience at all that should be correlated with, say, activity in a human brain. There's a lack of explanation. It's just that we're given this promissory note that, oh, well, if we just do enough brain scans, eventually we'll figure this out. And I'm just not sure how. I'm just skeptical of that. I'm not really sure how that's going to happen because no plan of action or operation has ever really been defined. It's really useful to look at what parts of the brain filter what sort of experiences or what sort of behaviors and things like that. Those are the quote unquote easy problems. But the hard problem is the fundamental question of why is there at all? That's the whole thing. And so I'd like to talk about that. We usually do end up talking about that kind of stuff. So I'm looking for participation. If you want to jump in, I'm going to go ahead and put in the link because I have some questions outlined just to see what the audience thinks. Like if there's any materialists or people who are on the, if you are on the fence, maybe there's certain questions. Um, Maybe some of these questions can be answered. Maybe you have an answer that's making you think, well, materialism may be true, and these are why. This is why. This explanation makes sense. This argument makes sense. I understand that there's no proof. You know, proof is good for alcohol. Proof is good for mathematics. Proof isn't really something that a lot of science engages in because there is no certain. You know, there's no real certainty at all. So, you know, we can at least open up a discussion to see what sort of arguments or what sort of logic can make most sense based on a particular framework. Hey, Caleb, how you doing, man?
Oh, doing all right. Had a chill 4th of July. Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. Cool. Did you do anything fun yesterday?
Well, for chill for me is just hanging out at the house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha, gotcha.
No,
Me too. Me
we
too. I
we
didn't do too much either.
Hannah's not a big fan of fireworks, anyways. So
Right, right, right. Let's make that a little different. There we go. And if anybody else wants to join in, we can do it. So yeah, Caleb, I had a few questions that I kind of brought up here, but I kind of want to wait until we may get some more people in, or we can move ahead and ask you some certain questions. But it's basically, I guess, what I'm trying to do, because actually these questions can be put to anybody's worldview, right? It doesn't really matter whose worldview it is. Hey, Arlindo, glad you could join me, man. How you
hey,
How's it
doing?
going, man? You all right, yeah?
Yeah. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm good. I
Good.
can't wait to have this discussion.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
people
sir.
can fire away any questions at me, whatever they've got.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
You know,
spent a little time this morning devising some questions. I think they're pretty easy. Some of them are pretty hard, but the whole point is to expose that there is a problem, that there is an issue, that on materialism we're having some issues actually answering completely. And a lot of it is can pertain to idealists too. So I guess you, as an idealist like myself, you can also try to put forth some of these answers from that point of view. And Caleb, you're kind of on the fence, right? You're not really a
yes,
materialist, but you're okay. Okay, cool. So, but you know enough about materialism to know how they reason about these sort of mind body issues, right?
yeah, I'd say I'm not afraid to say I was a former hard materialist. I mean, it's kind of hard to a lot of people in the West, I'd say, just are in just grow up in that culture. So
Hmm. Yeah, it is. It's a cultural thing. It definitely is. I've kind of figured that out by just examining like some other cultures, and they sort of don't look at things the same way as we do in the West all the time. So it's a little different. But yeah, guys, if you're new to the show, like and subscribe. We have these sort of conversations all the time, and we really want to be engaging our audience here. So 100% call in is always welcome. We try to open up conversations. That's why it's called The Discussion. And we talk about philosophy of mind. That's mainly the theme that we run here. And we don't look for an echo chamber. So if you have competing views, you're more than welcome. We want to definitely encourage you to come on, express your view. And I ask for permission if I can humbly challenge you, and you can do the same to me. That's the whole thing. Is it's a two-way street here. So yeah, like and subscribe if you like that kind of stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and present, since we have at least two guys here that can talk about it. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question. I'll put it up here on the screen. Why is there something it is like to be conscious? How would you answer that, Caleb? From a physicalist, like if you had to put your physicalist hat on, how would you answer that?
I mean, it seems like why. Let's see. Why is one of those tricky things. It's like, can I even answer the why question? I'd say maybe because it's like there's something conscious because, well, first it like we wouldn't be experiencing anything if there wasn't a conscious experience. So
the tautology,
Yeah.
tautological, what do they call it? Hey,
Yeah.
hey, man, that's well, you're an atheist like me, so we love when Christians walk into that kind of stuff because we point that out,
Yeah.
and now here
And
it is.
yeah. And then my second point though would just be like if I were to just try to answer it, it would be
Mhm.
like, well, I guess it's like once we have life, it's like it just seems like it would be integral, necessary for life to survive. It would need some sort of way of navigating the world, and well, what better way than having an experience? So
Gotcha. So functionalism, you're saying it's functional,
Mhm.
evolutionarily or naturally functional.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best answer you'll have because I think idealists and materialists would probably answer that the same way.
I can
And that's kind of
actually, I can
go ahead,
actually add
Arlindo.
to that.
Yep,
You know,
sure.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a minute here, and I'm going to pretend
Yes.
to be a materialist, a
Hmm.
la Nicholas Humphrey. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Basically, he makes a good argument, I think, not for physicalism per se, but for making a distinction between consciousness and intelligence. So Humphrey says just because something is conscious doesn't mean that they're intelligent, or it doesn't mean that they can exhibit intelligence. And just because something exhibits intelligence, like an AI system, for example, it doesn't mean that the AI system is conscious.
Mhm.
And then he tries to come up with an explanation for phenomenal consciousness by saying that only warm-blooded animals have consciousness because in their complex brains they create what he calls an ipsandrum, which is basically a bit like Penrose's triangle, the impossible triangle.
Hmm.
And he tries to explain that by saying that the brain creates what seems like an impossible mathematical equation where it creates feedback loops. And these feedback loops go from unconscious elements, um, and because of cause and effect, uh, they create some kind of scintillations because they start to get information from the external world, and then they create an internal representation of the world. And because uh, that system is designed to create an internal representation, it can't help but create an internal representation of itself, of the body and what it's doing. So voila, you get phenomenal consciousness. And now the reason why he says that warm-blooded animals um, can have consciousness, phenomenal consciousness, and cold-blooded animals don't. So warm-blooded animals would be mammals, human beings, dogs, monkeys, and cold-blooded would be lizards, snakes, and even octopi. And he says, even though, and this is where I think he has a good argument to make a distinction between phenomenal consciousness and intelligence. He says, even though an octopus exhibits uh, intelligence, right? compared to a chicken, it's cold-blooded, so its brain doesn't have enough energy, thermal energy, to feed its own feedback loops. So the feedback loops in its brain are cold, right? Whereas in a chicken, it's a warm-blooded animal, so it generates enough energy to power that feedback loop system. So the chicken, although it can't conceptualize many things, although it can't think and reflect in the way a human does, a chicken is able to perceive the world. It has phenomenal consciousness, although a very simplistic type of consciousness. But he would argue that an octopus is only clockwork. It's just an automaton, even though it seems to exhibit intelligent behavior. It's only clockwork, and there's nobody home, basically. And I would disagree with, because he goes by emergentism. But I think it's a good argument for making a distinction between, consciousness and the appearance of intelligence, which is something that we humans perceive. It's something that we humans conceptualize based on behaviorism. And we do a similar thing with consciousness. And yeah, because Humphrey is a physicalist, he goes by the assumption that consciousness has to be an epiphenomenon. It has to be some kind of illusion that gets reinforced over time by a reflective network in the brain. It loops on itself and creates multiple reflections, and before you
Mirrors.
know it,
The mirrors. The
it
mirrors just
reinforces the appearance.
My response to that would be, sounds like Humphreys is a racist against reptiles and octopi. So hashtag cancel Humphreys.
Well, my thought is that we can't even know. I can't even know if you guys are really conscious. For all I know, you guys could just be automatons. Like
I would say about Humphrey, unfortunately, even though he's a great scientist, and I think he does pay attention to the nuances in nature, and he has paid attention to many experiments with monkeys and stuff like that, even blind sight and stuff like that. His problem is that he starts with the wrong metaphysical assumption, in my view, anyway.
Right.
The reason why he says reptiles aren't conscious, and all cold-blooded animals are unconscious. They're just biological robots, basically, and there's nobody home. The reason why he says that is because he pays attention to the behavior of animals and how much they resemble ours. So, for example, he looks at a dog and he says the dog has phenomenal consciousness because the dog plays with its own qualia. The dog will play with a ball. It will explore its own qualitative world, its own world of experience. A reptile doesn't. He makes the case that that reptiles, that snakes and lizards, never play with anything, and they just seem to shift. But then again, that's going by observed behavior. And I would contend that the reptile is intrinsically, just because the reptile isn't slowed down by thinking, like we are, because it takes time to think and it slows us down. And sometimes it's better for us to just give up on thinking or trying to remember something, and then it just comes to us. Let the brain do its own thing, so to speak, right? But the reptile just reacts. And he would argue that it's at the level of sentition, but without phenomenal consciousness. It's just chemical reactions. It's just reacting to the environment. Something moves, there's a breeze, or there's a like a rustle in the jungle, and the animal will just react because of vibrations that act upon its body,
Well,
and there's nothing there.
bef-
A bit
But
like
wouldn't that
touching a
mean
hot
that it's
stove.
conscious of its surroundings?
Wouldn't that be sorry?
Wouldn't that mean that it's conscious of its surroundings, therefore conscious?
Good point. Good point. Because that's the thing I have trouble with. If it moves and reacts to its environment, um, it may not play with the environment for whatever reason. Maybe it's just not naturally or intrinsically contemplative, or it doesn't really explore the environment in that way, in the way that a human being would or a dog would.
well, here's a
It has
question.
to perceive something. Yeah, it has to perceive
Well,
something, in
here's
my view.
something, Arlindo. It seems like the other assumption he's making is that there's this central command station or homunculus that's driving the body around, kind of like a soccer mom. Um, it's kind of like, okay, if you're blackout drunk, let's say you black out, you're drunk and you black out and you don't remember the things you did, and you go and you do things, and a lot of scientists say, well, your consciousness, you're no longer conscious, but you're actually still behaving and reacting even in that blacked out brain state. You're still reacting to your environment, but you're not conscious. So this is kind of like how the animal world works, they'll say.
Yeah,
But
there's
the
actually
problem I have with that, well, the only
yeah,
problem I have with that is that while I can be blacked out, my brain can be blacked out, or my executive functioning mind can be blacked out. But who's to say that other parts of my brain and perception is blacked out? Like, why do we just assume that consciousness must mean this central homunculus person, and not that maybe we are the conglomeration of a lot of conscious entities working in harmony with each other until we can't work in harmony? Like, we get blacked out from brain damage or from drinking too much or poisoned or whatever. Then we black out. But then our body and our other parts of our, like you mentioned earlier, blind sight. There's people that
yeah,
see, but you're not aware of it. Well, somebody's aware of it. It's just
something's
not,
aware. Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
not the you that you identify with. So I'm wondering if there's another, if there's multiple yous in our body.
I think it's a unity that can be fragmented if there's brain damage. Because if we imagine the brain like a filter, then it's possible that we might develop, uh, like conditions like dissociative identity
Hmm.
disorder,
Correct.
right? And I think because consciousness is identifying with being human, even though the brain is that complex, it's still a finite thing compared to the quantum superpositions of nature. So you can argue that even though we grow as human beings and we take in more and more information and we become more mature as human beings, there's always a limitation with being human.
Hmm.
And I think that limitation comes to an end at death, and then all perceptual barriers fall away, and then you expand. Now, I'm not claiming to know for sure that we straight away become the mind at large or some infinite Brahman. There could be stages in between. It maybe we acquire like screens of perception more expanded, but we are still sort of limited. There's so much that we don't know really.
Are you
Hmm.
aware of any of this? That's the big question. So, what makes you come to that conclusion? Are you conscious of this?
Right. What makes me come to that conclusion is that, like Carl Sagan said, we are the universe seen through human eyes, right? And I would use some evidence, some empirical evidence, such as cases of and I was just reminded of this when I watched Rain Man. Cases of savant syndrome, in autistic individuals, and autistic people tend to have fractured brains. The connections aren't all there. So under physicalism, you would expect major deficits, and sometimes you do in the way that they behave. They find it difficult, and they need guidance by other people on how to navigate the world. But what isn't explained under physicalism is the fact that they can
Oh,
acquire mathematical knowledge, or they seem to intuitively know complex
yes,
mathematical structures, and solve puzzles, and even develop like artistic skills at the level of a genius. And
they're better
when you
equipped
ask them,
for it.
how do you know? Right. So when you ask them, how do you know? Uh, how are you doing this? And they will normally say, I don't know. They just know that they know.
Mm.
And to answer, so, and I'll get back to you. I've forgotten your name, but yeah, to answer, right, to answer Scott's question, or the point he made before, about unconsciousness or blacking out. You know, uh, Before, people used to go by behaviorism, and they still do to an extent. And there are certain conditions, such as sleepwalking, for example, where people can perform complex tasks, but they don't remember any of it. And when you look at their brains, they're in delta sleep, they're in deep sleep, and save for a few spikes of activity here and there, but they're in delta sleep. And when they wake up, they don't remember what they did. Now, and this is one of the reasons why we have to drop behaviorism. We can't go by behaviorism, because it's also possible to have someone who's lying perfectly still or
Hmm.
under anesthesia, and the anesthesia hasn't worked, and yet they're conscious, or they're even
They're
in
just
it, having a
paralyzed.
lucid dream, for example, right? They're
Yeah.
paralyzed, or so we can't go by just how sentient beings behave. And
Exactly.
also, we can't even know for sure that unconsciousness really takes place, because how do you know? There are so many people who say that they uh, don't remember their dreams the night before, and then suddenly throughout the day they something jogs their memory of being conscious in their sleep. So I think it's premature to say that, oh yeah, I was definitely unconscious, there was no experience, because of the nature of memory, and especially when you take a model like analytic idealism, where there are dissociations, um, and there are dissociations within dissociative barriers, and I think we create dissociations within ourselves, like
Hmm.
when we're
Trauma.
driving on autopilot, or we're thinking about something else, and we're not really paying attention to what we're doing. So something else takes over. So we create dissociations. But at the end of the day, it's all just one consciousness. You don't get several consciousnesses. You just get fragmented consciousness in reality. That's how I would see it, because
Yeah.
consciousness is only
Good point.
defined in one way, which is
Yeah,
to be aware.
you could lead that into our conversation last week about the mystics.
Hmm.
They might
Hmm.
be seeing something that we don't.
Right. Very
And
easy to
by
do. Al, how do you
yes,
answer
sir.
the question? Why is there something it is like to be conscious from your point of view?
Well, if you want to go from the title of the subject here, physicalism, um, this is like the one thing on physicalism that actually kind of adds up,
Hmm.
and all for what we're actually going to discuss is consciousness is a manifestation of a physical entity. and without it, it doesn't exist. Kill it, it dies. And that's, I know it's a very simplified term. So what do you think about that?
Repeat the answer. I'm gonna write it down. You said basically, are you saying that consciousness, there's something it's like to be consciousness because it's alive, maybe, or
Consciousness is a manifestation of a physical entity.
okay, manifestation of physical.
I would only. Okay, do you want to go ahead before you
A
answer, Scott?
living physical entity. Let me put it that way.
Right,
Mm-hmm,
which alludes to functionalism and emergentism.
And
It is an
The only
emergent
thing,
property.
right?
I did want
The
to
only,
address the Humphreys thing real quick,
sure.
because
yeah,
the thing is,
go
like,
ahead.
there seems is because for me, what it doesn't add up is, like, it seems like an arbitrary distinction with the whole cold-blooded and warm-blooded thing, because it's like, if the mainstream take is, with materialism, is that to get consciousness you need a brain, it's brain states. And so it's like, to say, well, there's these animals with brains but they're not conscious, and I'm just like, so how do you, like, that doesn't add up to me. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know, like, that's my issue.
that seems the art is kind of arbitrariness argument. Yeah, that makes sense too, because you would have to just, you're kind of like imposing. It's kind of like what I always say. A lot of arguments I hear, from different people, different worldviews. Like, say in this case, physicalists, certain things they take off the table, and then they go from there to say, well, how does consciousness explain, this or that? But you've already taken it off the table. So of course there's going to be no, answer, because you've decided we don't need this on the table. So it's kind of like you're not really giving us anything. You're kind of leading us into your answer, that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
But
would also say,
go ahead,
yeah,
Arlindo.
I would also say, the reason why I think consciousness as a fundamental is the best explanation for what's going on. Like the photon, it doesn't need an external light source to shine on itself. It is its own light. And the reason why I say consciousness is fundamental is because when we're talking about ontological primitives, first that solves the infinite regress problem. And second, the first level of reality cannot be nothingness by definition, because nothingness doesn't exist. It's no thing. It's not. It doesn't find expression in existence, right? So the next level up uh, in existence, or leading towards existence, would be, which would be the first one, would be consciousness, which is irreducible and cannot be explained by appearances which seem to be more than itself, appearances which we can perceive, such as objects. Whereas if we look for consciousness as a thing in that screen of perception, we won't find it, because consciousness is direct experience.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. That way it dissolves any sort of hard Okay, so I'm going to go
Yeah.
into the next question, and we'll go. Why does red feel red and not blue, or nothing at all? You want to answer that, Caleb?
Um, I mean, why does red feel red and not blue? I mean, as far as I can tell, when it comes to why I see certain colors and not others, has to do with, trying to think, is it the cones or rods in my eyes?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those. But yeah, it's like, if there's something wrong with those, well, we get, people who are colorblind. they can't
Mhm.
see certain colors, usually red and green. So
So if you have all your, you can perceive green, blue, red, and all that. Let's say you can. Why does it feel a certain way for red and a certain way for the other colors?
why does why does something feel? I don't like.
Because it is a feeling, all perceptions are a kind of feeling, right? It's just not the kind of feeling maybe we're used to talking about, which is like, oh, I feel sad or angry or whatever. But anytime you see something like red, it has a certain it's called qualia, it has a quality to
Yeah.
it. And you're
Mhm.
wondering why is the qualia of red different than the qualia of blue?
I mean, I don't know. I've never really like looked at it that way. Like oh, I've never come across an encounter where it's like, oh, I feel red. Like, so I
Hmm.
guess from you're putting it in a different perspective for me, but it's like to me it's this, like I'd say it that feeling and the seeing are integral. That
Hmm.
it's like,
Hmm.
so
It's a non-dual thing, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
It also makes me think, how do we know for sure that my experience of red is the same as your experience of red? Because
Hmm.
it's very private. And here, um, the inventor Federico Fagin would say it's private because it's to do with the original state, a quantum state, and it can't be replicated, right? It can only be experienced directly, and it's
Oh,
private.
that,
However, if we're going to use physicalist models, or not necessarily physicalist models, but if we're going to try to
Use quantum mechanics
come
or
to
whatever.
some kind of explanation, we can use diagrams with depictions of waves, sine waves, and based on how those waves propagate, it makes human beings experience a certain kind of color. Yeah, that is closer to the physicalist explanation, actually.
well,
But
no,
yeah, but then
you
again,
brought
the
up.
diagrams are not the color
Yeah.
itself, and it makes me think of Mary's room um, knowledge problem. Yeah, it's actually called the knowledge problem,
Yeah.
where she, Mary. I don't know if you're familiar. I think you are, Scott. I think you've mentioned it before.
Hmm.
Mary is a brilliant scientist. She knows all there is about, you know,
Colors
color,
and. Hmm.
colors, and the brain, and physics. She knows practically almost everything, right? That a scientist can know. But the problem is, she lived all her life in a black and white room, and she's never seen color. Now, materialists like Daniel Dennett would say that um, because we defined from the beginning that she knows all there is to know about color based on diagrams, as much as a scientist can know through diagrams, then she would intuitively know what, say, the color red looks like. Um, Now, I find that dubious, of course, but
That
um,
doesn't make sense.
it doesn't make sense, because if all she's seen is black and white, then she doesn't have any um, qualitative idea of what that would feel like.
Didn't they have?
But
I think I saw a video. They actually had a person who they cured her of blindness or something, or helped her to see. And
yeah,
you remember? And then she had never seen anything, and then they showed her crying and all this stuff. Well, she had
yeah,
heard all her life about everything that has to do with it. Was like they even call it like she's like the living Mary story or whatever. And
yeah. She was like a living Mary. Yeah,
yeah, and when
and
she
basically,
finally saw it, she was like overwhelmed. I had no idea this is what you guys were talking about.
yeah. And actually, it was actually Frank Jackson who came up with the thought experiment of Mary.
Hmm.
And Jackson said, when she steps outside for the first time and she sees a world of color, she sees the color red for the first time, she learns something new. And if she learns something new, then physicalism is false. Now, people like Matt Dillahunty would say that she wouldn't learn anything new when she steps outside
Right,
if you
right. I've heard him
stipulate
say that.
ab initio
He
that she
rejects
already
qualia.
has an idea. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
rejects
rejects
qualia.
qualia.
He hates qualia.
Hmm.
It's almost like something that he rejects experience itself, which
Yeah, he said
you
it's
know.
just an illusion. And we had a
Yeah,
conversation. I was on his show and I was pressing that point, like, but to have an illusion sort of implies you're having an experience of something, right?
yeah.
And that's when he pretty much dropped me, called me a jackass, and dropped me.
Oh, he dropped you.
No, no.
I actually called him because I was still a physicalist at the time, and I actually called him to see how he would answer that question. I actually brought up the you know, Mary's knowledge problem, and I put it to him, you know, does she learn anything new? You know, I was still wrestling with the whole idea, and he actually said to me, "Oh, I don't think so, because if you, yeah, he actually put it in those terms. If you stipulate that she already knows all there is to know about color, then when she goes outside, she's not surprised."
Hmm.
But I don't think so. I don't think so.
But
Yeah. What do you
uh,
say,
you,
Al? Oh, go ahead, Caleb. Go ahead.
I was gonna just say, yeah, you bring up a good point about, like, are we even experiencing the same color of red? And to me, it's like, if we ask other people and gather data, it's like, no, it's obvious that we aren't seeing the same colors. At least, even people who don't have color deficiencies in their eyes, it's like
Hmm.
women on average can see more shades of a certain
Mm.
color than men. So it's like,
Good point. Yeah. That's right. That's, you know what? There you have it. What do you say? Great answer. What do you say, Al?
Look, I'm gonna step out on this one because all I'm gonna do is shame the hippie that proposed such a question.
too much Mary J, huh?
I'll tell you, look, let me have two of whatever they had. This sounds
That's what
fun.
I'm saying. Hey, that's how do you think I came up with these questions? I was smoking a doobie before I
All right.
I did. I promise you. I was like, yeah,
It's the best way.
I'll
yeah,
give
man.
it a shot. I mean, okay, why does red feel red and not blue? Hmm. I don't know. Why does color evoke an emotion? It's a really
Good
subjective
question.
thing, It's like it's foreign concept to me, so I have a hard time answering this. But apparently, people do have favorite colors. So
Well,
I
I'll offer this little thing, and I don't know. I've seen this on the Essentia Foundation website, and they treat this question, and they kind of like um, got with some researchers into biosemiotics, if you know what that is. But biosemiotics is this idea that nature or reality actually communicates with other animals and life forms through symbols and meanings. And so the brain and we all evolve within the same natural world, right? So everything sort of works non-dually. So everything sort of one thing demodulates another thing in nature, because it's kind of like asking the mud puddle, how did God make you so perfectly round, and this and that, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, it's produced because of the rain and because of the environment. And it just happens to be you are that thing. And so, the illusion in that case would be that, oh, somebody made me a perfectly round thing so I can hold all of this water exactly the inches that it is in the measurement. How, this must have been fine tuned just for me. It's
yes,
like,
the puddle
right,
analogy.
right, the puddle analogy. So they kind of like use the inverse, and they'll say, well, basically, math makes sense to us. The universe, the nature has, what do they call it? The unreasonable um sensibility of the universe. We're able to make sense of it. you know like, why should humans be able to make sense of the universe?
Yeah,
It's
it
because we
requires a
come
mind.
out, because we're part of it.
Yeah.
We come out of it, and so it modulates to us, because
We're
we're made of the same stuff.
we're
And
conscious of our surroundings, and we created a methodology to measure it. There you
right,
go.
and
You
Yeah,
got math.
we do all that because
Hmm?
there's this volition to survive. There's this volition to procreate and stuff like that. Anyways, the whole point being that you know the biosemiotic story would be that nature reveals itself to the kind of observers that you are, based on different symbols that represent certain things, like elephants, zebras, animals. They see symbols in reality, and it causes them to behave a certain kind of way. It's the way that there's this two-way communication. And so, red is representative of something for us as humans that maybe it's not for a bat or something like that. It's just that's the kind of observer we are. But anyways, that's just the biosemiotic
No,
explanation.
I like this conversation we're having today because it takes ideas and puts it into practice.
hmm Yeah, we can't do mental masturbation. We have to do more than that, right?
Yeah.
We have to actually, there has to
Exactly.
be some value to it somewhere.
Have to manifest it in reality.
That's right.
Titty.
Yeah.
I would also add that in order for, say, a book to have any meaning, for the words, the letters, those symbols, in order for those symbols to point to something meaningful, there has to be minds to interpret the book, to observe it. Otherwise, the book is just an object, and it becomes meaningless. So minds are required for it to have meaning.
Get it decoded.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I would also say, to get back to the color thing. Oh yeah, which is gone, by the way. But yeah, it makes me think. Um, what does the world look like every time? Really look like, outside of ourselves. Every time someone asks that question, you can't help but say, to whom? You know,
Right.
to
Right.
whom? Because to
To
different
whom?
creatures, it looks like different things, you know, and maybe
Absolutely.
it just doesn't look like anything. Maybe it's all to do with perceptions in consciousness. How it's redolent of Kastrup's analogy, the cockpit analogy. You only see the
hmm
dials,
Right.
and you think that is it. But in reality, if it's a mental reality, then it's more to do with feeling in consciousness, which can take up many forms, many symbols,
hmm
many representations. But in order for those symbols to represent something, a mind is required to interpret them,
Right.
to make sense of them. Yeah.
Exactly. 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 And by the way, I wanted to say, give a shout out to Sophia, our resident mystic, man. She is out today for technical issues, but she is following us on the live chat. So what's up, girl? Wish you were here.
What's up,
Anyways,
Sophia?
I'm
yeah.
buying her a SIM card. Damn it.
Yeah, we got to do something, man. Really, it's her internet. The internet situation is horrible from where she, because all
Yeah,
that
I know.
wafting and
Sometimes
it's crazy. But let's go on to our next question. Why does first person experience exist in a third person world?
I
What would
got
you
this
say?
one, but I'll
Okay,
go
go ahead.
last.
Okay, let's go with Caleb first.
Why does first person experience third person?
You could also
I
say, why does a third person world exist in a first person experience?
That's right. hmm That's true.
well, I mean, I don't know, like it's just seems like for whatever reason, it's like the conscious experience is, it's very self-contained. I cannot go into Scott's mind, can't go into Al's mind. And I'm sure if I would want to go into Al's mind, but
That's right.
Get corrupted.
So, and I would say that that would probably, without just diving deeper into it, like that makes sense in a materialistic world. It's like we all have our separate minds, and it's not the in a physicalist world, it makes sense that if there's a life form and it's having its own conscious experience, then it doesn't make any sense that it could peer into someone else's conscious experience.
But why is it disassociated?
I mean, that's something I would have to think deeper on. Like I couldn't give you a good answer just on the spot.
Gotcha. All right, Arlindo, you're up. Answer from a physicalist and an idealist perspective. Why is there disassociation between the first person and the third person?
Well, from a physicalist perspective, we are born from zygote cells. We develop our own screens of perception about the world, and the world is separate from us, and it's made up of dead unconscious matter, and it makes us. We're made of that very same stuff. Consciousness is an illusion, which means that it doesn't really exist. It only seems like it does.
All right, Matt.
So there you go. Yeah, life has no meaning.
That's right. Meaning is an illusion. So is
mind is what the brain does.
That's right.
That's right. And yeah, that's one explanation. Another explanation would be that consciousness is dimensionless, and it can create the illusion of dimensionality. And I'm not advocating for a kind of solipsism here, but I would say that it fragments itself, or if it's in its own nature to be aware, it suddenly becomes aware of its own awareness, and then you have like a kind of like a metaphysical prototype for a plurality of minds, where it can look at itself. It's a bit like a cosmic dream, and
Well, that's Carl Saganist of you. Very Carl Sagan of you, because he's saying the same thing. It's kind of like the universe is experiencing itself through different localized perspectives.
Yeah,
like a dream or something cosmic like that.
Yeah, it's a bit like a dream. Like, for example, like we all, in my view, we all have that creative principle, which is inherent in the universe itself. So the universe creates things, even if it's entropic. And one could argue that it's also a derivative of this infinite pleroma. But then it creates us, and we're finite beings, but we're partially dissociated from that larger mind. And our own mind, because they also have that same creative principle, which gives meaning to as above, so below, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our below is similar to how things work above, so to speak. So when we dream, it can experience objects, and we experience other characters, and we can communicate with those characters. And often, I've found in my experience anyway, because I'm a lucid dreamer, I've had nightmares where I'm running away from a monster, and then suddenly I realize I'm dreaming. So that changes. I turn around to the monster, and I might ask it, what do you represent, or what's wrong, or I try to understand what's going on, which I see as an aspect of myself. I'm addressing an aspect of myself. It's a unity. It's like monistic idealism within my dream. And when I address the monster suddenly changes. It might turn into some inoffensive, innocuous imp, and it becomes very friendly. It might start to cry, and then I embrace it, and then it starts smiling. It becomes friendly, and some kind of energy is released. And when I wake up, I wake up invigorated, like something's been sorted out or solved.
Hmm.
There's some kind of integration. So I almost see the dream character not just as a symbol, but an image that represents something within my own psyche, maybe something crying out for attention, for my attention, something from the subconscious. And I treat it like it's sentient, because I am sentient, I'm conscious. And if it's an aspect of myself, I want to integrate it. Even if it seems scary, if it seems evil, I want to understand it and give it unconditional love, and try to channel it in a healthy way, as opposed to repress it. And
Right.
that's my own thinking. It is very
Right.
much in terms of Jungian psychology. So when it
Yeah.
comes to the universe itself, I think a similar process is going on, a similar thing. But I think we are all one mind, and this
Mm.
mind can fragment into several perspectives, and these perspectives go off exploring their own paths, and
Well,
these
yeah,
paths are, you know yeah,
yeah, and Sophia makes a
they
good
differ.
point. She says, the same reason your cells do things you are consciously unaware of, which makes a hell of a lot of sense because that's kind of like the Michael Levin story. He says that really we are the conglomeration of all the millions and trillions of cells in our body working together in order to give us this overall super organism or super um, awareness. And if you think about it, we're in touch with everybody. It's just in different ways. Like we're able to have this unified conscious experience because all of our little cells and parts of our body and bacteria and this and that are all sort of adding it all up for us in order for us to have that unified experience. So maybe the universe, in order for the universe to be conscious, it needs little billions and trillions and countless local perspectives of itself in order to all unify into this super organism that understands itself, which is probably unimaginable from our perspective, being that we're just one of these small cells within the body of the universe. It could be something like that. And it seems to be consistent with the story Michael Levin tells about how all biological systems are made up of little intelligent cells that are all only perceiving its little job and its little constraint to do its little thing and live its little life out, and then it dies and replicates or whatever, and then this other thing.
Then it's
Yeah, it's like it's all it's not like each of our cells understand what we see or whatever, or maybe they kind of do. Maybe it's kind of also top down in the sense that, because I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like if you've ever been really stressed about something, all of a sudden your body starts reacting to the stress that you have. You might get ill, you might get sick because you're just under so much stress
Yeah.
or whatever. So it's kind of like a back and forth sort of communication, maybe. What do you think,
yeah,
Al?
The
yeah.
older you get, the more that stress affects you. That's for sure. But
Hmm.
no, but for this first person experience existing third person world, it exists because we're epic communicators. I think that's why we're the top of the food chain. And as we can communicate, you look at other groups of individuals like the Native Americans or the Sub-Saharan Africans, they didn't have horses, so they can't communicate
Hmm.
as well, I should say. But yeah, if you have something um, like your grandparents, for instance, and they don't. They tell you, they can tell you stories about the things they did when they were your age.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because we can communicate. So the third person world manifested in reality, no, it doesn't like exist now, but it did, and we can communicate that, and it's actually a really beautiful thing. Makes us even better as people, and not only learning from mistakes, but learning from the wisdom and all
Right.
that gets
Right.
passed down.
Like
And
it unifies. It unifies at the end of the day. At the end of the day, everything becomes one sort of understanding.
Mhm.
But
and it is a physicalist ideal as well, because well, it's valuable.
What do you say,
So
Caleb?
well, it's like what you brought up earlier about, like, each individual cell and it all coming together. It's like it is an interesting question. Like, does the panpsychist have a point of, it's like, so we have this, our whole entire body, which is having an experience, but are our cells having their own individual experience as well? And so
yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
I think Levin is a panpsychist. Is he a panpsychist? Arlindo, do you know, or is he
Levin, I would say Levin is the best kind of panpsychist. He's not a constitutive panpsychist, I don't think. He's more of a Platonic
right?
panpsychist.
Platonic, right? Because he did mention that.
Yeah,
He did mention that a
yeah,
lot. That he appeals to a Platonic sort of version of panpsychism. At least
that's
I
correct.
think he called it biopanpsychism, like at least within
Yeah,
biological systems or whatever.
yeah.
Do we?
I also
Yeah.
haven't seen him disagree with Bernardo Castro, so
No, he
it
doesn't.
could be a sort of like an idealist panpsychism because he does explore the idea of a Platonic realm, and he brings up the concept of uh, oscillation in that Platonic realm, because he would say a primordial realm that gives rise to movement, to action, to space and time couldn't possibly be a still primordial realm. It couldn't be inert. Um, Now, some might argue that in saying that it oscillates, it brings up a meta time, or it's still within the confines of linear thinking. And I mean, after all, we're only human, is only human. But it could be that at that level, the principle of what you call it, of non-contradiction doesn't
Hmm.
apply, because it's a law, and laws also have to have some kind of origination, right?
Hmm.
So we are dealing with a realm where perhaps all possibilities manifest in a realm of potential, right? And just
Right,
because they're
right,
in
right.
potential, it doesn't mean that they don't
Well,
exist, but
Because
they are there.
I did see an interview lately where Levin said, well, the thing about it is laws are prescriptive, not descriptive. I mean, they're
Yeah,
descriptive, not prescriptive. So he says that's the reason. He says, because if you look at bioelectricity, he goes, basically, consciousness, intelligence, learning, all of these things happen from a frequency that's distributed through the some unknown platonic substrate.
well, it
So he's
is,
saying,
yeah,
but I mean, it's some little thing that was observed, but a lot of the whatever the hell you mentioned, you
hmm,
know, they sound like a bunch of nut jobs. What is
yeah,
it? What is it useful in our world?
oh well, one thing, most of your AI developers, researchers use principles of panpsychism in order to have the belief
Yeah,
that they're going to be able to create these conscious machines. And they
makes
said that the consciousness of our AI is going to help because it's going to give the motivation. Just like the humans, we needed to be conscious because of function, kind of like what Caleb was talking about earlier. Your panpsychists also believe that the reason we have consciousness is so that the matter can function a certain kind of way to do different things. And so they say, well, if this is true, then we should do the same thing for our AI. We should go ahead and make them conscious so that they can do all the cool stuff we do.
That
Problem is, like you
makes
said, Al, it's kind of batshit crazy when you think about it, because
well, it
you
makes
have
total
no
sense. It does.
you have no what's your grounding for that principle. Like,
Yes,
you just
it
can't just
explains
say
why
it,
AI doesn't work.
right?
So,
You just can't just hand wave it into existence. Like, there's got to be
Yeah.
some sort of
no, like
mechanism.
our communications through our cells and all that, like we were mentioning earlier. I mean, on a very, very low level, that does happen, and I mean, it does bear a tiny bit of meaning, but in the grand scheme of things, these people are just mentally masturbating.
That's right. That's what Kastrup is saying. Kastrup said that's kind of like saying if I was to simulate a kidney or a bladder perfectly on my computer, it would actually pee on my desk. But it never does that. It's just a simulation. Like,
Yeah,
that's all these things are, you know.
and while the panpsychist brings up a good point, like I said, but it's like, well, if all your cells are having this conscious or proto-conscious experience, well, then how does it all come together to combine?
Right, combination problem.
Yeah, it's a combination problem.
Yeah, they still haven't figured that one out yet,
I-
and I think that's key to making it work. Now, Bernard, I think the other guy that works with Kastrup now, the integrated information theory guy, Christoph
Christoph.
Koch. So he says, because he used to be a
Or Koch.
panpsychist, Koch.
Cock, yeah. Christoph Cock. He's dicking around now.
Yeah.
He's mad about town.
I give her some pills, and the next thing you know, she's getting that Cosby cock.
There you go. That's physicalism right there.
Yeah, but I think he said that he finally came to the conclusion that, I have no mechanism on my panpsychism. I have no mechanism to really make it work. So the only way it's going to work is either panpsychism is just a brute fact that it just does it anyways, even though it's illogical, even though there's problems, it just does it. Or consciousness is fundamental, and that's why consciousness will find a system that's able to decode nature and make meaning and sense of nature. And if that system is right for that, then consciousness will inhabit that system. The greater mind will express itself through that little local system. And he says that just makes more sense to me, because he says the problem is consciousness is causal. It has causal force.
In the South,
on
we call that
there is no causal force with consciousness on either materialism or epiphenomenalism or panpsychism. But on idealism, it's more like a pattern. It's a pattern in nature that can express itself through given systems.
In the South, we call that a bless your heart moment. Because it's like, okay, good for you, child. But on a little side note, you want to see something funny? I mean, you will laugh your ass off on this. But just get on YouTube and look up whatever that atheist experience show is with Dillahunty on there.
Yeah.
And I'll just search Patrick.
Oh Lord, I've seen every one of his.
Oh my God, Matt loses his freaking mind, dude. It's hilarious.
Arlindo and Caleb, if you don't know, there's this guy in one of our groups that we share, me and Al, Fight on the Fence. So there's this guy named Patrick that's a panpsychist. And dude, I'm not even lying. I'm not lying. He's apologized to me personally. He doesn't live too far away from me. I've actually met him at the hospital.
Oh, he lives up in the Panhandle.
Yeah, we met at the hospital where I work at. and he actually came in, wanted to discuss writing a book with me, and we had a meeting, and we we spoke about it. But he's more of a pantheist, but he's also a panpsychist flavor pantheist, where I'm more of an idealist sort of naturalist. So
Yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we have enough in common where we should be able to, come up with a good book. So I'm like, cool. Well, one day, he asked me, let's have a debate, me and you, on this whole panpsychist thing, because he says, I've seen a lot of your posts and you seem to be really resistant to panpsychism. And he's always challenging me in the comments or whatever, and we have these back and forths. So he's like, yeah, we need to set up a formal debate, me and you, one-on-one in the group. We'll have polling and everybody's going to judge who the winner was and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, that'll be fun. So we did it. And man, this dude got so mad. He not only did he just said, screw this whole debate. I'm not doing it, because I was asking him, because he was saying, no, physically consciousness comes out of this proto consciousness. So there's like a particle. So I'm like, well, what is this particle? What can you show me where this consciousness particle is? And he's like, no, I can't. And then everybody's like, well, you just lost the debate, because man, you're supposed to be you're supposed to point. You were the one that claimed it. Now you're saying you can't point to it. So he got mad, dude. And I swear to God, Al, he contacted me and said he wanted to beat my ass physically. He was going to come up to the
Oh
hospital
no.
and
Wow,
beat
I've
me
never
up.
seen Stampy do that before.
Yeah, he
Okay.
did. I think he got drunk and he called me and he said,
Yeah.
look, man, I want you to either you come up here or I'm going to fucking find you at the hospital and I'm going to beat your ass because I know where you
Dude,
work.
Wow.
Stampy is actually, he is clinically crazy, and
Insane.
he has his ups and downs. You can tell when he's on his meds and when he's not.
Yeah.
And when he's on his meds, but overall, even when he is having his episodes, he's still harmless,
No, I know he
He's
is, but I was
having
like,
a hissy
Jesus
fit.
Christ, you want to really hurt me physically because we have a disagreement on some philosophical view? And he's like, oh yeah, I take this shit very serious. And I found it very offensive. I found it very embarrassing. I found it, a lot of people have turned against me, and now I'm trying to sell a book. It's just all this shit that I'm like, but you asked me to do it.
Right?
Yeah.
You wanted to debate, bro. I'm sorry I fucking wrecked your reality. It's like, yeah, he's a trip though, but definitely anyone
Watch,
watching it,
yeah,
just
atheist
go. What is it?
experience. Oh
Atheist
yeah.
experience, Patrick. Just that's all you got to type, and you will die laughing.
I might pull that up
Oh.
before we end the show so you can hear it yourself.
Right? I'll see
Go
why
ahead.
you
Was he
don't
well
find the
received?
link.
Huh?
Was it well received by Matt Dillahunty or whoever he
Oh
was
no,
on?
He
Matt
drives Matt batshit crazy.
bonkers. He
I'm
goes,
sorry, I
yeah,
don't like Matt. I call him an
not at
atheist
all.
shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just to see him lose his fat-headed mind is just great.
And the thing is, I
There's
used
something
to love
psychopathic
Matt.
about him.
Yeah. Something was
Yeah.
weird with Matt. Like I used to love Matt back in the day, like when he was first started. You remember when the Eighth Experience looked like it was like a little TV show on public TV or something, and then it
Yeah.
kind of grew, and he was really cool, started doing
He
debates, and
was, yeah.
I learned a lot from Matt. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
he's helping me learn logical fallacies and
Yeah.
ways of
So did
thinking
I.
and art. But then he turned into this, I don't know what happened, but he became very
Arsehole.
just an asshole, just so
Yeah.
aggressive and mean and
Yeah.
hangs up on you real quick. Like,
He became a Democrat.
oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of atheists who just go through a new atheist phase, and then
yeah.
they realize, oh, there's this.
I've always been more enamored with the Four Horsemen of the new atheism. Dawkins,
Mhm.
Sam Harris. They seem
Yeah.
more relaxed, chilled out.
I really
can-
like
Dude,
what's that
I
other
met-
guy? Cosmic Alex O'Connor. I like him
Alex
too.
O'Connor.
Yeah, I like him. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
all right.
He
When I
seems
really
pretty open-minded.
when I really started diving into well, it was religion first, and then it went into philosophy. I actually wanted to go and talk to these people, so I went to some atheist gathering in Orlando, at the convention center there,
Mhm.
and I got to meet them, and I was like, something isn't right about these people. Something is just not right about these people. I mean,
Devil worshippers.
I'm an atheist,
Baby
but
eaters.
it's like
They eat
you
babies.
people aren't atheists. Something just isn't right here.
Well, you got to understand, they usually most of the time come from a very fundamentalist Christian evangelical background, so they've already got this sort of fundy mentality. So regardless of what position they're going to switch to, they're going to start expressing it through this very dichotomous sort of way.
Your first mistake was wanting to talk to fellow atheists.
Yeah.
You wonder why I'm so abrasive with people nowadays. It's like after 10 years of putting up with these people, it's like, look, just cut the foreplay, shut the fuck up, spit it out. Show me on the doll where God hurt you.
Right.
Okay.
I was saying this last weekend when we had our show. It's like I've got atheist friends in town, but man, I hate hanging out with them. Like, I'd rather hang out with my Christian buddies, so I vehemently disagree with them a lot too. But at least they don't bring the shit up. They don't care. It's like they're more laid back. But it's like the atheist friends of mine, at least the friends of mine, they're very aggressive, and it's almost like they feel like they're on some kind of crusade to bring reason and rationality to the entire planet or something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's like damaged goods. And no, I don't buy bruised fruit. Okay.
If you guys seen an episode where Matt Dillahunty actually reprimands Aaron Ra, basically Aaron Ra.
Oh, I remember him. Yeah,
That's
the
gotta
big
be
fat
funny.
guy with the long hair.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
it was advocating for some type of strong atheism, and he was practically saying there is no God, and he was saying to this caller, all religions are bullshit. And then Matt Dillahunty pipes in and he goes, you can't say that because you don't know all the religions that exist out there.
Right.
And then Matt Dillahunty goes, you also can't say that there definitely is no gods. And then he went on to say that the most logical position is agnostic atheism
Right.
or de facto atheism, where you say, I don't believe in God, not I believe there is no God, which is a big difference.
A claim,
I
positive
don't believe
claim,
in
yeah.
God because I see no compelling evidence, for his existence. Until there is such a thing, I'll continue to be an atheist. So, which
What a
fair enough,
weak
it makes
ass
sense.
argument. Look, if you can't explain why there's no God, you're not an atheist.
Yeah, like I'm willing
It's
to
very
say,
simple.
I'm willing to
They're
say,
self-contradicting concepts. There
and
you go.
And I'm willing to say I don't believe there is a God, and I can defend that. So.
Right. Because belief, you're talking about belief,
Yeah.
But anyways, here's the next question, Caleb. How does consciousness arise from unconscious matter? That's the classic question.
Now, why did you have to go and ask me that?
Put your physicalist hat on.
Oh man. Well,
How
I
would they
mean,
answer?
I would say that this is so like even if I were to say, all right, so let's say that consciousness starts to begin when life arises, would I be able to say or be able to tell you exactly when that happens? No. Like it would be much more like it would be a lot like asking, when does the first human arise in the species Homo sapien? It's unanswerable. It's like, it's asking like, that sort of question. So I'm
Yeah.
not even sure I could.
The demarcation problem.
I could not pinpoint to you when consciousness, well, when unconscious matter becomes conscious matter.
The number is 42. Go ahead, Owen.
Me?
Yeah, how do you think a physicalist would answer that question?
Yeah. So how do I think it arises from unconscious matter? Well, it's magic, isn't it? it's a
Oh man,
process of
they don't believe in magic, man.
well, let me say that consciousness, doesn't really exist. It's an illusion. So when you get unconscious matter, sometimes it creates integrated information, to use Cox terminology.
Mhm.
And from
I
that
love Cox.
integrated information, there's a feedback loop system, and that creates the epiphenomenon of consciousness, which doesn't really exist. It only seems like it does. It's a kind of illusion that we're still trying to get to grips with.
I got it. So I'm not
all
really
the other
thinking.
illusions.
So I'm not
Yeah.
thinking. I just think I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's right. You think that you think, but you're not really thinking, and you're not
that
really
explains
thinking that
everything.
you're
Yeah.
thinking.
It's the I think theory. I think, therefore I'm right.
Yeah. That seems like something you would come to smoking a lot of weed. Man, I'm not thinking. I just
Maybe
think I am. Wow. That's crazy. All right, let's
maybe
go.
Dennett was a weed smoker.
Well,
Yeah.
my question though would be: is that really the strongest materialistic position?
It's hard to tell, man. A lot of people swear by it. Like,
to me, like,
Yeah.
like if I were to stick with materialism, I feel like I would fall into the identity theory. Like, to me,
Yeah.
that seems like the strongest position.
But that's idealism, and that leads directly. That's the problem. That's how people get to idealism is through.
So it's a pipeline to
Yeah, it's a pipeline because it says that our consciousness is identified with our process. Then where do you draw the line? You might as well just say everything's just conscious, or because that's all you experience is the consciousness. So you are the process of nature, and you just extend it out. Because if it applies to you, then you'd be special pleading to say it only applies to you or humans or whatever. So you just, to cut down on all the different problems, like the mind body problem, heart problem, you make that last move. Now, not to say that there isn't any questions or problems that they would need to answer on that, by the way, but it's just that identity theory is the really close cousin of idealism, because it almost becomes semantical at that point.
Basically, the monistic physicalism of Daniel Dennett, which is eliminativism, is saying that, or a kind of illusionism, is saying that consciousness doesn't really exist, because if it's an illusion, then it's not really doing or being. What we think defines it. So in a way, it's almost like he's saying that we don't really exist. How we feel, the one thing that we can be sure of, that is a brute fact of reality, just gets explained away as just a mere illusion. It's not really there. It's a seeming. But then the seeming is the reality.
Yeah.
So
It's
See,
the best of our it's best of our perception. Monsters really do exist in a child's mind, and but this consciousness, I'm with Caleb on this one. It just, who knows how it arises, and I mean,
well, I
I
had this
don't even
conversation
want to
with
try to think that, hey, one day we'll figure it out. But this is why the theist and all they try to attribute it to their god. And it's like, I got your moment here. All right, look at this. And all.
Yeah,
It's proven.
like, I had this conversation with Matt Dillahunty, and it took me by surprise at first because we started talking about consciousness, and he goes, "Well, consciousness doesn't exist," and so I was kind of thrown off, and I was like, "Yeah, but I'm having a conscious experience talking." He goes, "No, I'm not saying that
It
you're not."
manifests in
He goes,
reality, therefore it
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah.
and he's saying, "I'm not saying." He says, "I'm just trying to get you to go along with the words we all agreed on. Like if you say that this building existed from 1858 and now it exists in the year 2025 as this old structure that needs to be renovated, but it existed since 1850. It even has the, the landmark inscription or whatever, and we've got all this evidence that it was built in this year and this and that. Would you agree that it existed since that year?" And I'd say yes. And he'd say, "Okay, but consciousness, can you point to consciousness out there in the world? When you look out your window or you look out your eyes, do you see consciousness?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "Right. So it doesn't exist because that's what existence means." I'm like, he goes, "Therefore, there is no consciousness, not real." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. It's real, but I can agree that it doesn't exist, I guess, under that strict definition,
Yeah.
but it's still real though."
You
Yeah.
So
And like,
what?
that kind of proves
yeah.
that kind of proves something else that's sort of a hidden assumption in your whole
Yeah.
worldview, that
But
If
you
things don't exist,
you can't
things aren't
measure it,
real. Yeah, like things aren't, and he goes, "Yeah, because this is the whole foundation of why I'm not a theist, is that God doesn't exist. You can't show me evidence for God, therefore it's not real." And I'm like, and he goes,
wrong yardstick,
just
brother.
like
Yeah.
just like consciousness, God and consciousness are sort of the same category of things.
Yeah.
They're
It is.
things
It's
that
not
don't
a
ex- they're things that don't exist, therefore they're not real. And my whole thing is it exists, but it can still be real though.
Yeah.
So he
Like,
was seeing
in
a
Ma-
contradiction. I don't see the
yeah.
contradiction.
And well,
in
what does
Matt's yeah, sorry, in Matt's world, only those things that can be measured exist or can be affirmed to exist. If it can't be measured, forget it. So your consciousness doesn't exist because it can't be measured. You will only permit a certain kind of evidence, empirical evidence. You won't allow anything like direct experience, because then it would have to say the people who had direct experiences of God, that's real. It's real for them.
right?
yeah.
And,
Mhm.
you know, what are
Yeah.
you
Well,
going to do?
you're
Well,
Batista, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know I talked to you before. All right.
Yeah.
But no, Matt's biggest problem, aside from his bad head and arrogance, I don't know, kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? But he does not have the tools to measure things.
Yeah.
And that's like a very big problem. I think that's where a very big disconnect between um a lot of different groups uh, arises. They just don't have the yardstick to measure it by. And
Well,
but then again, a lot of atheists are a bunch of heuristics. So
Like, well, as a point that Scott brought up in previous discussion with me is like another issue is that it's like illusion has multiple definitions, and so it's like if you're saying illusion as in it doesn't exist at all, like
Right.
that just seems absurd to me. But if you were to if you're a physicalist and you were to say that consciousness is an illusion in the sense that things don't seem to appear as they seem to be, then I could agree with that, because it's like light from the sun takes what 7-8 minutes to reach our eyes, so
Mhm.
it's like there's that lag. It's like we're not experiencing the world as it truly is, so it's like if we're going by that illusion, then
Right. And I think Castrop says that they should say that mind is an illusion, but consciousness is never an illusion, because consciousness is the awareness or the knowing of the illusion. So the
yeah.
consciousness is always there. It's just that the mind is sort of, you can say that's an illusion because we see illusions all the time. And even under idealism, we don't have direct access to reality as it is ontologically speaking. We have an appearance, you know.
I'm with Sam Harris on this one. He actually says the only thing in the universe that can't be an illusion is consciousness.
Right.
I mean, we can be mistaken about what we perceive in our field of awareness. You know, like we see a rope on the floor, we might think it's a snake, and vice versa. The object exists. There is something real being perceived. How we interpret that is up for grabs, you know, and we
That's the
can be
limited mind.
mistaken
Yeah.
about, yeah, we
Yeah.
can be mistaken about the nature of what we're perceiving. But when it comes to perceiving itself, when it comes to being aware of something itself, that can't be an illusion. That's reality. That's real.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
no mistaking it.
Oh yeah. If we're defining consciousness as this pure experience, you know, the raw experience, then yeah, there is no such thing as calling it an illusion. It
Right.
makes no sense. And I say that a materialist should be able to agree with that statement.
Which brings
They
us right
should.
into the next question. What is the exact causal link between those things, the brain states or the mind, and the conscious experience, that raw conscious experience? What's connecting them together?
I mean, from just the material standpoint, it's like, well, you know, it seems like the causal links and um, the correlations seem to they would say that they are the same, that the correlations and causations of brain states to conscious experience, you know, it's like,
They're the same. Yeah.
you know, it to them it's very self-evident. So
And yeah, that's sort of the way an idealist would answer it too. It's just they're both identified as the same thing. It's a non-dual sort of explanation. So that dissolves that question away. So identity theory would do that, but I think in my view, what I've heard a lot of physicalists say that it's the complexity that causes the conscious experience to emerge from that complex brain state. Like that brain state emerges from the complex interactions of the neurons, and then the consciousness comes out of that process as an
That's
emergent
that's what the
property.
so
biologist. That's what the biologist Jerry Coyne said. He was a big materialist, world-renowned biologist, and he's always said that complexity must give rise to consciousness. But when he was asked if he thinks, what is it, water fleas are conscious, and we know that they lack a nervous system, a complex nervous. I think there's only about half a dozen cells in them. You know, and they asked him, "Do you think they are conscious?" And he said, "Well, they exhibit intelligent behavior. They seem to have complex behavior in the way they react to their niche, and in the lab. So I do think that water fleas are conscious." And when he said it, as Bernardo Castro pointed out, and I think Bernardo Castro wanted to have a debate with him, and he refused because then he said that he wasn't too sure about how to defend physicalism. Uh, when he said that about water fleas, he just contradicted the materialist premise, which
Mhm,
is consciousness arises from complexity. Well,
mhm,
water fleas lack complexity, they're microscopic creatures, and yet they behave in intelligently complex ways. So, what's going on there? That seems to favor idealism, or at least Kastrup's analytic idealism, over physicalism. So, what's going on there? I do agree with one thing about physicalism, and
mhm.
it's only the monistic premise. I do think that reality is one thing
mhm.
made of the same stuff. I just disagree about the nature of that stuff.
Well,
I think materiality is only an abstraction in mind, and I think the real nature of reality is mental anyway.
I feel like though that one place where materialists and idealists could also potentially agree though is, even though idealists say consciousness is fundamental and materials say that, you know, it arises from complexity, like it seems to me though that higher orders of consciousness does require complexity, and so it's like I feel like we could at least that the two camps can agree on that.
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yes, I do.
We're
And
talking about mind, though. I think the only difference is the way we word it. Like materialists would say consciousness arises from complexity. I think an idealist would say modes of consciousness arise from complexity, but consciousness is
yeah,
always there.
yeah, we're talking about metacognition, which is different. The more links the brain creates, and the more experience a particular organism has, then obviously there's going to be a higher, higher modes of experience, right? And they can get really convoluted. But I would say that it's not a causal link that exists between brain states and conscious experience per se. I would say that we are dealing with the same thing. It's just mind um, in motion, and mind being acted upon by other mental acts, in nature. So I think the brain is nothing but a symbol, a representation in mind for what um, mentation, for how mentation is
Doing.
behaving, for what's
Hmm.
happening in the reality of mind in the first place. So I think that there is definitely a correlation, but one thing doesn't cause the other. It's just, we are just, even though we make a distinction between physical and mental, it's just one thing. It's only one thing in motion. And we have representations of that behavior in mind. And in this case, it's a brain. And when we look at the human brain, it's a mental representation of what a human self looks like. And the self can be thought of as a bundle of thoughts. And these thoughts make awareness itself uh, believe that it's actually that when it's not. It's almost like being the sky, but if the sky contains clouds and there's this really dark, tempestuous cloud, which is analogous to the human ego or the
Or
self,
thinking. Yeah.
then the sky is going to identify with being that cloud. But really, there's only sky. There's only open sky. There was only ever sky. And when the clouds clear, that's when you're in a meditative state, and
Hmm.
all thinking ceases, and you're in that blissful
That
stillness.
peacefulness.
And
Yeah.
then you realize your true nature. That's how I see it. Anyway.
Well, they say that's psychology. They say that people use drugs initially as an escape, and what they're trying to escape is their ruminating mind. All of this thinking is kind of like the dark clouds that cover up the happiness, or the you know the peace, the existing nature of the I amness. And so
Yeah.
when
That's
you take
true.
when you take the drugs or the alcohol or whatever it is that your choice of addiction is, the whole point of it is that it stops you from thinking, and you just
Yeah.
sit there and you're just kind of immobile, and you're just experiencing the effect of the drug first and foremost. So you're just having an experience. You don't have any thoughts that gets in the way.
And sometimes, and I learned this from Sam Harris's app. Uh, what do you call it? Waking Up. Sometimes you can get to a state where the thinking carries on. There's still thinking going on, but it's happening to no one.
Yeah.
And you can acquire that perspective of just observing. It's almost like a kind of reframing where you're not identifying with the thoughts. You can actually, instead of
Observe
being
them.
lost, you can just observe them. You can actually become aware of thoughts emerging and being aware that those thoughts are emerging, as opposed to which is the usual default mode of perception, as opposed to becoming aware of them after the fact.
Arlindo, I wish you lived down here in Florida. Me and you could start a yoga. We could start a yoga studio.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
them
Sounds
ladies
like
are
fun.
hot.
Yeah.
I'll be the receptionist. I just want to see the hotties.
Yeah. I'll let you and Caleb do the interviewing.
Oh,
That's right.
thank you.
Oh,
Give
she's
some
hot.
wings.
She's in.
I'm honored.
Yes. Yes. All right. Next question. Why do altered states of consciousness change perceived reality so dramatically?
Hey, can I have a quick interjection here?
Yep.
I can barely hear everybody. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. I'm going to log out and I'll be right back. All right.
Okay.
See you in a bit.
See?
All right. So what do you think, Caleb? Why do altered states of consciousness change perceived reality so dramatically?
Well, it's like I'm trying to. It's really hard to answer this without bringing the materialistic map into the equation. It's like,
Well, that's what we need. We need you to put your materialist hat on.
well, it's like, so there does seem to be a link between conscious states and brain states. So it's like when you take a drug, whether it be alcohol or a pill, it's like it can alter that. And so it's just, I don't know, like if you were to take parts of the brain out piece by piece, eventually your consciousness would at least seem to cease to exist, at least in the material plane.
Right. So in other words, those parts of the brain produce consciousness or are conscious. So on materialism, those are the two dichotomies I can point to. So in the third way, idealism, but we're going to leave that out for this. And we'll say, well, these brain parts, all this inert matter, if you take any of those parts out, it changes the conscious experience dramatically because it needs those little dumb inert parts in order to generate the conscious experience the way you were, perceiving it. Or you can say that these conscious states, it isn't the arrangement or anything like that. It's that inside each and every piece of matter there's a little proto consciousness, and that's why you're getting the quality that you do, because when you combine all of these proto consciousness together a certain way, they create the kind of qualia. If you replace a little bit of matter with another piece of matter, it'll change the consciousness. But here's my problem with that is we have these examples though of people who lose their entire cerebellum, where their whole brain looks full of water.
Yeah.
But yet they act normal. There is no change. The change is very little. There is no drastic change. It's very little. But even though it's rare, all you need is that one example. All you need is one example, but there's quite a few, even as rare as it is. So it's kind of mysterious. What do you think, Arlindo?
Yeah, I think that's about right, really. I mean, if I'm going to put my physicalist hat on, I would say that if I drink alcohol, if I drink enough alcohol, I'm going to be drunk, and the inebriation is caused by ethanol acting upon my neurons, and obviously I'm going to feel differently about the world. So that would be my physicalist explanation, right? it changes my perception of reality because my brain is not working as it normally does. Now, if I'm gonna put my idealist hat on, I would say that consciousness is my reality. And, if I experience an altered state of mind, my consciousness is altered in some way to feel a different flavor. So perceived reality happens in consciousness. And if I am experiencing something which differs from my usual mode of perception, then it's only an alteration, and the cause of it is uh, whatever I've been doing to to have that, to experience that alteration, which might be playing around with other elements of my reality, which in my worldview are also mental in nature. All I perceive are symbols that mean something to me, that represent how reality works, how um, mentation behaves beyond my own personal mind. So, you know, if something affects my brain, if I suffer an injury, or if I have a rod go through my left hemisphere, like Phineas Gage,
Hmm.
there's no denying that my experience of the world will change. I will feel differently about the world. I will feel differently about myself, and it's almost like I'm suddenly entering into a different kind of dream where I feel differently about myself. I may even have trouble remembering how I used to be like with other people. I might become grumpier, more sensitive. But that is only to do with changes to perception. In no way does it mean that by damaging or by destroying a brain that necessarily experience dissipates or is destroyed.
Yeah, I think it
Otherwise, yeah, otherwise we
it's
wouldn't be able to explain things like savant syndrome and
yeah.
terminal lucidity, which can happen with people with dementia,
Mm.
Alzheimer's. Just before they pass away, they suddenly remember everything, and then they're capable of having normal conversations with members of their family, and then they pass away. That so far can't be explained under physicalism. But
That's
yeah, go
true.
ahead.
It's almost like it gets back to this problem of self. Like, who are we talking about when we talk about ourself? Because the self is always changing. It's all our brain states are always. I'm not the same person I was, before I ate my breakfast. I'm not the same person
Yeah,
tomorrow,
you are.
or you know what I mean. You're like you're always changing somehow. Like, what do they call it? The problem of the stack, or the I think that's the name of the thing. Where, like, at what point is a stack identified as a stack of hay? Like, how many strands of hay does it take to be considered a stack? Like, at what demarcation point? And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's like a rough analogy to say that the you is never really defined in static terms, because we're not
Yeah, you
static
are.
individuals. How so?
You're the same person when you're hungry, tired, all of that. It's just a different, perceived reality. It makes you act a little
The
Uh,
differently.
so you're saying
But
the
you're
yeah,
still
continuity
the
of it.
same person.
The
like
continuity.
I kind of agree with Al with here. Like, I understand, like, there is that whole, like, oh, like, over time every cell in your body gets replaced, and
Hmm.
it's like you're constantly changing. Yet there's like a core you that that doesn't really change.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like, what is it? Every 7 years, all of your cells have completely replaced
Completely.
Yeah.
themselves or
That's right. Yeah.
something. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but
But it's like, over the years, it's like, my core principles, don't seem to change all that much.
But
It's
what
like,
if
no.
you were to forget? What if your memory didn't work? Would you be the same person if you can't remember what your core values were or
Oh
your
yeah, I'm 40 years old and I'm just as big of an asshole as I was back then, and I can't remember half the shit that happened back in my 20s.
Mhm.
But
no, I know. I mean, that is a good question. Like people who get lobotomies, it's like that part of the brain where it's like you basically destroy someone's personality. It's like, are they
like
the same
Phineas
person?
Gage became a different.
Mm.
But the thing that Al's bringing up though is that continuity part, because Phineas Gage, even though his personality totally changed 190 degrees, he still identified as that same person he was before the accident. He viewed himself as, and so would everybody else.
Yeah.
It's almost like even if you were to black out from being drunk and let's say you committed a crime, the courts would still hold you responsible because you're still that same person.
yeah,
You just didn't remember it.
Mhm.
well, the courts justify it in a different way. We won't get into that, but
Yeah.
I mean, it is true. Like, I mean, for the question at hand,
Well,
does it change your perceived reality? Uh, Like, we use drugs, for instance, or alcohol,
mhm,
and yeah, it actually does.
Hmm.
But the core individual is still there. It's,
Yeah.
I get goofy and joke all around everything when I get drunk, and all, but and then
yeah,
I'm kind of mean when I'm sober.
it,
But you'll have like, oh, the Christians are renowned for this. You're not the same when you're drinking. Oh, shut up. But
oh,
um,
I
but
feel like
it's like, no, it's just it opens up a different aspect of your personality when you're on drugs, basically. And they say inhibitions to the winds on alcohol, and it's true. You want to bang a chick, you get her drunk, you'll have a better chance.
Mhm.
And it's like, does she want to do it anyways? Yeah, but so it does. Whenever there's, I guess, a altered
She's
state, it does
yeah. She's just
affect,
become
but it never kills the
uninhibited.
core individual.
Yeah, uninhibited.
well, I feel like
Yeah.
the issue though is like we're kind of seeing this through like a dualistic lens. Like we're
Mhm.
thinking that there's two distinct things going on when there's not.
Yeah, because fundamentally, there's just reality. I mean, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if we go all the way back,
Um,
there's just reality, and it's the people who cipher it off into different divisions and descriptions, because that's the only way we can describe anything is to do comparative.
Bingo.
Mhm.
But
I was
at the end
gonna
of the
say,
day, from a God's eye view and an objective view, there's just reality. It's just what it is. It's just constant.
yeah, and I was
Bingo.
gonna say like, who who I was when I was only 5 and who I am now is the same person, but there's been a change, not a replacement.
Right.
That's different. I've
You behave
changed. I haven't
differently.
been replaced, as far
Because
as I can tell.
why would we
Yeah.
care about our future selves? Like if you say, well, I'm paying my bills today so that I don't have to go through the anxiety of my bill collectors and this and that a month from now. So let me just go ahead and pay my bills, or let me go ahead and take my medication, or let me do something now that won't be a problem for this me person, this me thingy in the future. Which that kind of like right there tells you that at least we're under some sort of notion that the continuum goes on until we die. Like, because we all that's why people fear death. It's like, I don't want to die. Who is this I you're talking about? It's the that thing you identify with. And even though this thing you identify with is always changing. I mean, and forget about the brain. I mean, you could just stump your toe and you've already changed your brain state, and
Yeah.
you're no longer thinking about how much you love your family when you're, in excruciating pain. You're like, that's all you're thinking about. It's like,
Yeah.
but you're still you.
And if we're
Can-
dealing with the block universe, is there even a past or future?
Right, right. Again, I think I told Caleb one
You're
time.
just a
There's this,
witness in this
yes.
timeline, basically.
Well, I had a argument with a materialist one time. He was a philosopher. Actually, he was an academic philosopher up in New York, and he used to always argue with me. He hated. There's two things he hated the most. He says, "I hate theists, but what I hate worse than a theist is an idealist." And he goes, "Those are the two things, but the idealist is the number one thing I cannot stand, because y'all are what gives fuel to theism or whatever." For some reason, he said that. So he's and he goes, "What's really important is the science and the things that." And I'm like, "Okay, well, if we play by your rules, what about the block theory of the universe?" He goes, "Every time an idealist brings this up, I just want to shoot him in the face."
Yep.
Because I can't stand. I don't understand how Einstein even thought of that. I hate it because all it does is it gives you guys fuel. But you think time is all one thing, and all events are just one thing from a, like, how, why would you think that? Like, that's just idealism. Um, in the language of science, it's just word salad. And I'm like, no, it's actually true. The
That's
block
science.
theory, it's
Scott,
science. And he's like, no, it's not. And I'm like, he goes, what evidence do you really have? And I'm like, are you really not familiar with time dilation? Like, there's so many, like, gravity waves, like cosmic background radiation, like all of these things go right back to relativity,
oh,
which is what promoted the whole block universe metaphysic. That's what it's based on. He's like, I know, I've heard the story, but
yeah.
I ain't buying it. I don't care how many times, what evidence you point, I'm not buying it because it's just fucking ridiculous. I'm
Well,
like,
They
that's
don't
the
know their own
thing.
Bible.
When you mentioned
yeah,
idealism, I was like, bro, we're gonna have it out.
yeah,
The thing is, it's kind of it's a little bit of a language barrier
hmm,
because ideal does not exist in
the objective,
philosophy,
right?
actual philosophy, and then all these little spin-offs. People want to coin their philosophy that's not philosophy, and it pisses us off. It really does get on our nerves. And but you know, basically, if your idealism is still quite a foreign concept, because it's just there's so many different, like, all the different denominations of Christianity,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, this is my way of doing things, and it's like, bro, just look at the objective world. It's right outside your door.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's kind of the why he did that.
No,
And
I get it,
our
and
brains
that's right.
basically we're like, we think that humans are flawed individuals, but we can observe reality a lot better through correct methodologies, and all these other little woo-woo things just get on our goddamn nerves.
Right, because see, the thing is that I realize is that dualism, I mean, yeah, dualism is very intuitive because we all have to deal with dualism every day. Like, we have to deal with other people. We have to deal with other objects. Otherwise, we'd be bumping into objects all day. So we naturally, intuitively see. But one thing science has told us is that common sense is not a good guide to ultimate reality, or to
No,
think
it's
how
not.
nature really, like, how many times have we been wrong
Yeah,
about our intuition? And so
yeah,
that's why, and that's the other thing. Going back to that academic guy, I brought up that same thing, and he's like, Yeah, but there's certain things we can't let go of. We can't let go of, duality. We have to base everything on duality. And I'm like, why? I mean, Einstein is telling you that there's just reality. We're the ones that cipher everything off in order for things to be, useful to us, in order for us to make sense of things. But just because, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. You know, if it does and it helps us to do certain things, but it isn't really a reflection of how reality really is
Well,
ontologically.
the only reason we want to discover reality is so we can use it and navigate it better.
Right.
That's all. And it's really annoying when people have all these alternate realities and their way of doing things. It's like, okay,
Well, you know
all
what
right,
really, now that you said that,
Baptist,
Al,
you're saved by grace, and you don't have to do shit and could be a piece of shit person all your life.
what you just said, Al, kind of reminded me why that academic philosopher finally ended up blocking me, because he says, so show me one piece of evidence that supports idealism. And I told him time dilation. I'm like, the thing that you hate, the block universe,
Yeah.
that's the evidence that supports idealism. And he goes, you fucking asshole, you're done. He just blocked me.
Nice. Actually, I will say this much, I get on the atheist a lot, but I get on the philosophers as well. They forget the whole point, and the whole point is virtue.
Yeah.
If your methodology is not making you a virtuous person, you need to re-examine that.
I look at philosophy as the art of plausibility. Like, it's an art form for determining what's the most plausible explanation for a given number of topics or whatever. That's really what it is. And so it's very
Agreed.
analytical. It's like we analyze the logic. And the problem is there's so many modes of logic. So now we have different frameworks we can talk about. Like,
No.
you've got paraconsistent logic, which denies, A is not A at the same time and in the same sense. Like, it can say no. Paraconsistent logic would say you can have paradoxes, like infinity, for example. And infinity is possible,
Oh,
but
great. So we're in
on
another
classic
dimension
logic,
that
it's not.
we can't
Right.
observe another dimension, but they do exist.
Yeah, we just haven't seen it yet. But
Sure.
So
that
what?
but the math bears it out. That's where the
Yeah,
because you got to understand, possibility means contradict. It's pointing to contradiction.
yeah,
So if it's, as long as there's no contradiction,
yeah. I did
Are
want
you
to.
consciously aware of all this other crap? Or is it just some woo-woo you made up? See, that's the bad thing about humans. That's our biggest flaws. We have the ability to lie.
the lie. I know.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Caleb.
I was going to say I was wondering if we were going to get to the multiverse or many
Yeah.
worlds stuff, because it's like a lot of there's many materials still now, even with um, our discoveries of the quantum world and non-locality. And it's like, one of my favorite physicists to listen to, who, it's like, I still disagree with his conclusions, but it's like he's a very intelligent person, is Sean Carroll. It's like
Hmm.
he is a many worlds advocate, but it's like,
Proponent. Yeah.
but I don't, and of course I disagree with that conclusion, but it's like he's, very bright guy, seems to want to know the truth of things, even though he doesn't seem to embrace, what you would say is idealism.
Did you see Eric Weinstein's
Oh,
interview? That
yes.
debate on what was that? Who's the guy? Morgan.
Pierce
Pierce
Morgan.
Morgan.
Here's
Yeah.
Morgan. Yeah.
I did see that. It was
Man, that was brutal, man.
yeah.
And I don't understand why Eric was so confrontational. Like, Sean was being trying to be real polite at first,
Mm-hmm.
but then he kind of asked for it, man. And he was like, well, at the top of your paper, you say, I'm not a physicist, I'm just an entertainer. Like, so I did read your paper. That was
Yeah.
one of the first things I read.
Pierce Morgan's a
Yeah.
dick, but
No,
he
no.
was
Although
funny.
he was allowed to present his geometric theory in Oxford.
Yeah.
Was it in the 70s or the 90s? I can't remember. But he was explaining things like chirality, symmetry, and that geometries are sufficient enough to create multi dimensions wrapped into one tiny thing, and then it
The
explains
strings.
the three-dimensional world that we see. And Eric Weinstein's argument is that we don't need the superfluous theory of a multiverse to try and fill in the gaps. And I think once he even likened it to kind of like a god of the gaps, where you bring string theory into it and all these dimensions in order to fill in all the gaps and make all the connections without even demonstrating that those connections exist. And in doing so, um, also some of the stuff that you end up hypothesizing um, is unfalsifiable, or at least so far, because we have
Yeah.
no means to try and
But
verify it.
Weinstein says, but what it does do is it gets it promotes tenure in the university. So if you are on the string theory bandwagon, you've got a good career ahead of you, because
Yeah,
since the 80s they got together and for some reason they all decided this was the most promising theory, which I guess at the time it was, because there's a lot of mathematics that went into explaining a lot of things, and a lot of different things were verified, predictions were verified. So at that time I think maybe it was like one or two things, but still that was better than nothing. So they went with it. But now they have made no progress since then, is what the story I keep hearing from people like
yeah,
Sabina Hassenfelder, Eric Weinstein, and others will make
yeah,
that that whole argument. And so I guess his whole thing is like, we need to start thinking outside the box now.
yeah. Are you
Why?
familiar with Dennis Noble, the biologist?
Nuh-uh.
He tends to go against Richard Dawkins. They had a debate once, and Dennis Noble
Oh
actually
yeah, I
made the
did
point
see
that,
that. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
he made the point that if you have a bottom-up view of evolution and biology, and if you try to explain everything in terms of genes, bottom up, um,
Limiting.
basically there's a lot of money in it, and then the problem is, because there are so many, when you try to map the genome, um, when you try to alter each gene, it affects other genes. It's like a web of
Hmm.
connections, and you end up with so many, when you try to, in medicine, when you try to cure something, you end up with so many symptoms and so many consequences of what you're doing, what you're changing, that it it's a lot of money to try and explore all the other connections that you've brought into focus that need exploration, and then you end up spending more and more money, and you get nowhere,
Hmm.
because Noble's argument is you can't explain everything based on just genes. You need to have a top-down approach. And when you have a top-down approach, you can focus on just one problem and you avoid all the other problems that you create when you use technologies like CRISPR, for example. So if you have a top-down approach, you examine what goes on with the organism, and then you work out its cause. Like you examine a particular symptom that the organism is experiencing. You examine the top layers, and then you trace it back to the core, the DNA. But on the way, you don't have to go that deep in order to be fruitful in healthcare, right? And you end up, and that way you end up spending less money. And it's funny because during that debate, Dennis Noble said, and also genes don't explain all the changes that occur over time. And it's not just the environment either. It's not just natural selection, as you know we called it. It's
Mhm.
also the organism that has a kind of intelligence that alters the genes. Because he said whenever the organism comes across a virus or a type of bacteria that harms it, the cells, you know, to do with epigenetics, they start to communicate with the nucleus, and they start to say, because the nucleus has a kind of mechanism that tries to reduce the typos it makes. So the less typos it makes, the more receptive it is to external organisms. But when it
Yeah,
makes
wasn't he
typos,
talking about that that and what's consistent with that idea was morphological leaps, like you know how you have this big explosion of evolution that happens with maybe an organism, right? Like it just
yeah,
dramatically changes. Like you know how we think it's so gradual, and it really is. Like it's gradual over
yeah,
millions of years. But
yeah.
then
But sometimes there are
sometimes
leaps.
there's
Yeah,
leaps that just all of a sudden they said that's when environment changes drastically, but the intelligence of the organism and all of its parts and pieces and come together
yeah,
and come up with a solution, novel, intelligent reaction to the stresses in the environment,
yeah.
which
Well,
really
that's
bring
what
which
Noble.
that's against the whole. I understand that that's like against the traditional view because it's you're sort of implying there's some sort of top down intelligence that's at work in the organism, you know, and it's
Yeah,
not supposed to really work that way.
so basically through epigenetics, the organism has a kind of intelligence that tells the DNA to make less typos, and when it makes less typos, um, it allows for its own system to grab onto the external viruses and bacteria, and that way it helps the immune system to create something new, you know.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and this, Noble argues, can be passed on to future generations, right? And that's a change that occurs not because of um, natural selection over time, but because of the organism acting upon itself as a kind of intelligence that makes an alteration right there and then, and that gets passed on to the next generations. And that's there's evidence of that. And Richard Dawkins was actually saying, well, yes, but in a way that is still Darwinian, right? And
Mhm.
Noble said, well, I make the point against neo-Darwinism, but I'm actually a good Darwinist. And by the way, Dawkins, Darwin was a Lamarckian, and Lamarck is back,
Right,
because
right,
that's the
right,
whole
right.
premise of
Of
Lamarckism. It's the
right,
fact that
right.
any change that happens now to you, not to do
Could be
with natural selection over time, can be passed on to next generations.
that's
It
right.
won't be something like chopping off a limb and then your offspring will be born limbless or something like that, but it will be
Yeah.
something along those lines. So there's a modicum of truth to what Lamarckism was saying. And Noble would argue that much of what Lamarck wrote was misrepresented by neo-Darwinists.
Right, because they
Which, yeah,
he would say that DNA and genetics, those the only thing they do is really provide structure, and they pass
yeah,
the structures on, like the morphology, like the basic skeleton outline of an
that's right.
organism is there, but
Phenotypes
the
and that.
new information has to come top down because where else is it going to come from?
That's right. That's right. So
Which
yeah, so Darwinism, not neo-Darwinism,
right,
but Darwinism is quite close to
consistent.
Lamarckism. So
Yeah,
yeah,
pretty
that's what he
consistent.
meant by, you know, saying
So
that Lamarck is back. But yeah, that it's a lot more convoluted than the old story that's been peddled over time in biology, in evolutionary biology. But yeah, it does focus on a kind of intelligence to do
mhm.
with the body.
Well, you
and
know,
it
it's
doesn't
like
always have to be natural selection.
Koch, Christoph Koch. He says that
Yeah,
you know, on his model, on the integrated information theory model, he says basically it starts with consciousness. So consciousness is the given, and consciousness is causal. So the nature of consciousness is to be intentional, is to be volitional, is to have some sort of causal power within a system. The system constrains it, but the system is there. And if it's adequate to express consciousness as a causal sort of force or pattern, it will do so. So the question is, why does consciousness have intentionality, like this aboutness sort of quality? What do you think, Caleb, from a materialist point of view?
Well, I mean, I'd say it has intentionality because, I mean, to have an experience, it's like, even if it's just the most base of intentionality of survival, it's like, you know, to me, it's like intentionality has to come with experience or consciousness.
Hmm.
It's
I would agree with that.
they're intertwined. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
do you think, Arlindo? You agree?
I agree. I think consciousness is aware of the information, and then the information in turn, which happens within it, makes it feel a certain way, and then it might want to make changes. Um, and I would even go as far as to say that there's a will intertwined with the primordial consciousness. If you imagine that right at the beginning, let's say, right, I know, to me consciousness transcends space and time, but let's say that there's a beginning, because we're thinking in linear terms, and
Hmm.
there is this pristine awareness, and because it's aware of itself, and then that awareness of itself might prompt it to want to explain to itself its own nature, like, who am I, what's
Hmm.
this, and then it will try to create, or will, representations within itself. It's almost like a being moving itself, exploring its own body, and this intention, which comes with its own intrinsic nature of awareness, will, like a zygote, cause it to, because it only knows itself, it will cause it to create copies of itself, because that's all it knows. And in creating copies of itself, it becomes aware of the concept of plurality, and all of a sudden that concept becomes salient. It becomes a reality within its oneness. And there you have it. You have a perfect
Hmm.
explanation for the plurality of minds. And, you know, and because of that, that's to do again with intention. It wants to know itself. I'm starting to sound like Federico Pagin, but yeah, it wants to know itself. If we're going
Hmm.
to think in linear terms, that's what it's doing. And
Yeah, it has to
yeah,
know
and
it's even like if you think about
yeah,
like just a single cell, like an amoeba that knows where to kind of go to get food, energy, and do what it does. It has to model itself. There has to be some sort of self-modeling to where it knows where it exists in time and space. Like it's got to have
yeah,
some sort of referent from the other. Like it's got in order to navigate to energy, you know. So it seems.
yeah. You create. You can derive fractality within it. You can derive holarchies, um, mereology. Like parts and wholes suddenly have a relationship, just as a personal limited mind can have a relationship with another limited mind, and it's all happening in this oneness. And you know, and that way, and this is only theoretical, but we have good grounds to believe that's the case. Just like we have good grounds to think that, solipsism, which is unfalsifiable, is just, we can get around it. We can circumvent solipsism by taking into account the theory of mind that we grew up with, as babies. we turn into adolescents. Eventually, gradually, we learn that there are other minds out there. There's mum and dad, and we can interact with them. So
Object permanence. Yeah.
yeah, so we can formulate a theory of mind, and that's based on observation, because everything on our screen of perception looks as though other minds exist. But we can never be 100% sure, but we can be confident enough that that's the case. Whereas solipsism, because everything just looks as though there is a plurality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas solipsism, the only thing that solipsism has going for it is that the mind, perhaps, and solipsism in this sense would be that your personal mind is the only thing that exists, and everything else is just a figment of your imagination. The only thing that solipsism has going for it is that the mind could deceive itself with illusions of other,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's
but
the
yeah, if
nature.
I don't think we should extend solipsism to say like a one mind, like a primordial mind, which is in the monistic view. I think that's different. That's but
That's
I
what.
don't even buy the
That's what
notion that
that guy
one mind feels lonely. Yeah.
Rip Snow. He's saying that basically idealists are going to devolve into solipsism because the greater mind that they're talking about is their own, and then that's just solipsism. But it's like, no, not really.
Rip Snow is full of shit, and I think he's misunderstanding. He's misunderstanding. Um, his idea that his conflation of solipsism with idealism comes from his own ignorance of what idealism entails. Really,
And
he
he's not
needs
trying
to.
to. He never listens. Whenever you tell him, look, you're actually straw manning my description of idealism as I understand it. He keeps trying to force you into, no, this is what you believe, this is your position. And I don't
Yeah,
like when people do that. It's very frustrating.
No, I'm
it
not.
really is.
Yeah, I'm not even an idealist, and it's like I don't try to engage with him. He's very
Yeah,
dogmatic.
big time, big time.
Yeah.
What do you think, Al? Why does consciousness have intentionality or aboutness?
I don't think I could follow Batista. He's eloquent with that British accent and all that. So. No, he hit all the nails right on the head.
Yep.
But I guess the only thing I can interject on this question is the intentionality is due to our IQ going up.
Hmm.
And I think we're at a spot in, I guess, our evolution, if you will, and where we're too smart / dumb for our own good.
I agree.
And there is that intentionality, like he explained, how we want to know all these little aspects of why am I me? Who am I? And all that. And I don't know. I just say we all get drunk and become dumb.
Ignorance is bliss.
And be happy. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. How can we explain mental representation in physicalist terms?
Well,
Like when you like when you see something that means like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, here, like, I don't
I
know.
feel,
There's something that Sam Harris really stuck with me. He says something that's really good. He says, if you went to the gym and you start working out and you're really straining your muscles really bad, it's excruciating, you're going through it, you do it happily, and at the end you're glad you did it, and you know why you're doing it. So that pain represents something positive. But let's say you were just walking down the street and that same feeling, the exact, no difference, the same excruciating feeling of working out really hard happened to you just out of the blue, it would be excruciating. It would be insufferable. You'd be ready to kill yourself. Why is there a difference between they're the same exact feeling, but we've put some sort of representation on it. Like we have some sort of meaning behind the pain when we're in the gym, as opposed to the pain when it's just arbitrarily happening out of the blue. It all of a sudden means something bad. So,
There is a crucial difference.
yeah.
Yeah. One has the promise of reward and the other one doesn't. It just
Hmm.
happens suddenly and unexpectedly, I would say. So um, it's really funny, and I think it also depends on people's attitudes about life and what they're willing to do. Some people just want instant gratification. Other people are willing to sacrifice things
Hmm.
uh, to have a better future. I don't know if you've seen a film called uh, Explorers, and it's based on Lord of the Flies, a book called Lord of the Flies,
Hmm.
and basically, and it's a story about good and evil, right? And Colin Farrell is basically a teacher, and he teaches these kids. Basically, the Earth is about to be destroyed. There's some kind of impending doom or apocalypse about to take place, and these kids are selected to travel in space to another planet to carry on the human race, right? And and he goes along with the kids, Colin Farrell, and he teaches them how to look after the harvests, the plants on board, life sustaining things, and also to preserve um, the DNA in test tubes, and also how to teaches the kids how to procreate and to carry on the human race, because their destination is this paradise planet, this new Earth-like planet, but it's light years away, which means that the kids who initially leave the Earth will never reach it, but they will have to teach their kids, and their kids will have to teach their kids, and only a distant generation of their descendants will reap the rewards. The
Mm.
problem is on board. Colin Farrell, their father, let's say, dies, and there are two influential kids on board. One is like Abel, and the other one is like Cain, right? Let's say, and Abel cares about what the father taught him. Abel says we should carry on doing what we're doing. We should sacrifice our lives to maintain to to uh, to maintain the mission, you know, and to make sure that our descendants reap the rewards, that they reach the planet and they've got everything they need and they can enjoy paradise. And that's in the distant future. And we will never see it, but we're
Hmm.
doing something nice for our descendants.
Hmm.
But the Cain-like character, the evil boy, he just wants chaos and instant gratification. So he says, "Why the hell should we bother? We're not going to get to see the planet anyway. Let's have a party. Let's not care about maintaining the harvest. Let's forget about the future. Let's just live for today until we're dead, and at least we will die happy."
Hmm.
So there's a big difference. One is willing to sacrifice, and he doesn't care about reward, but the other one just wants instant reward, instant gratification, to the detriment of the future and his own descendants. There is no future for him. It's the here and now, and fuck everyone else,
Hmm.
basically. So I
Hmm.
think that plays a role, and it's redolent of what John Milton says in Paradise Lost, through the character of Satan.
Hmm.
One man's hell is another man's paradise lost, or something like that's the whole
Mm.
quote. And
I
I think there's
saw.
something
It's a
really deep.
value, basically. What your brain will basically put a value on things, and that's what it's gonna represent.
Yeah, and also too, it depends on at the time what the values are of the society you live in, like the overall consciousness of the world. Like for example, I can't help but think of global warming. Like, I think about environmentalism. Like I hear certain people are like, we got to think about our future. We've got to protect the earth so that our future children and grandchildren will have a planet that's going to be sustainable, and this and that and this and that. And then you've got some people are like, man, screw that. I'm denying it because right now that's going to ruin our economy. It's all these restrictions are going to do, all these things that are going to hold back progress from making money and, doing things. And so why should we listen to these people? And so they'll start disparaging their theories and start talking about, well, it's just a way for you to make money because you want to
Oh yeah,
sell this whole environmental global warming hoax so that you
value.
can get, you know what I'm saying? And so you get these, and they're both pointing the same accusation at each other. And I think really what's going on is the values are simply different. Like one
Yeah,
person really they're thinking about the economy now, today's economy. It's it's
yeah,
it's almost like, one thing Elon Musk said that was kind of interesting because he was the one that was heading up the Doge thing, right? And he was trying to get rid of government waste in Washington D.C. and this and that, right? Well, now that he kind of got kicked out and now he's on his own, now he's all pissed off.
with
But
the
one of
black
the
eye.
things that, yeah, so now one of the things he was saying was he goes, well, he goes, one thing I learned about DC and fighting the corruption and stuff like that, like you can do it, you might not. This depends on the administration you're with. But one thing, they're very short sighted on both sides. All they really care about is the here and now. He goes, but me as a technologist, what I understand is that we have this AI revolution going on. So what I'm looking at Doge as, it's like suppose somebody tells you, Al, and says, Al, I want you to go down to the beach on Pensacola Beach and clean up all the you know, mess that's on the beach. You've got garbage, you've got people shitting on the beach, you've got all this crap, beer bottles everywhere. I want
Yep.
you to I want you to spend a week cleaning this up. Meanwhile, there's a huge tsunami out in the ocean that's coming to destroy everything in a matter of 2 days.
Hmm,
What would the point be in trying to clean the beach up if you've got this giant tsunami on the way? He
That's the
goes, "That's
reason.
what we're looking at." He goes, "So it's not that I'm anti anything. It's just that realistically, you've got this huge societal shift that's about to happen, and we're worried about this petty shit that we should have been worried about 30 years ago, not
Right.
now."
Why do you think I voted for Obama in his second term, and I was going to vote for Bernie after that?
Yeah,
Let it hit.
let it hit, man.
What's the fight? Yeah, what's the Fight Club reference and all the blow up all the credit unions so we start over?
Right.
But it's just like now people. It's an ingrained thing that everybody has in them. It's a wonderful survival technique, but we want to get the most resources out of the least amount of effort.
Hmm.
And for the most part, even conservatives, they people care about the here and now,
Yes,
and
and they're
and
very
it's
short-sighted.
yes, and it's very. I'm guilty of it. All of us are.
Hmm.
And the thing is, well, if my life's better, I can make it better for my children. But that's basically the mental representation, that you can get out of this.
Yeah.
It's just if you want to know the square root, means, cause, whatever you want to call it, that's just what's good for me.
Yeah.
Well, that was
My
all the that was all the questions I had. But
Oh,
Caleb or anybody,
yeah.
did you want to give one last thought? And then I was going to play this crazy
I
video with
answered to
Patrick.
explaining mental representation in a
Yeah.
physicalist world is just. I
It's
think
impossible.
I think the medical doctors figured it out with the happy and sad chart of pain. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good point. That's even more simplified than I did it. Well
that's a
done,
good
Caleb.
one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this. This is the Patrick guy that that threatened my ass, and then also he calls the atheist channel with his panpsychism like all the time. And he like thinks it's a gotcha moment for Matt Dillahunty. He even called me one day. He's like, "Man, I want you to call in right after me and tell them that you agree with me."
Stiffy's crazy, but we love
He did.
him.
He's like, "Man, I want you. I'm gonna own them. I'm gonna defeat Matt Dillahunty by pointing out Roger Penrose or theory and pantheism, and then he's gonna, of course, hang up on me. And then Scott, I want you to call right up and say how you believe me instead of him or some shit." And I'm like, "What?" That's so petty. But anyway, here we go.
Because you were saying the other religions.
Is anyone listening to me, or am I on there? This is Patrick Stampy. I'm trying to get through.
Oh, hey Patrick.
You're.
I've been waiting. I've been trying to be patient. I was muted. I had it muted the whole time for that entire call. Another atheist debating another Christian. That's too easy for you, man.
Another atheist debating another Christian? I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, a Christian is an easy smackdown for an atheist. Talking snakes, woman made of a man's rib. That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay,
here.
Patrick, we hadn't even addressed your welcome to the show. I just accidentally took you off hold as John was finishing his thoughts. For those who aren't aware, Patrick is the person who emailed today to ask us to call him if we had the balls to actually have a real debate about God. And
Exactly.
yeah, except that debates aren't about balls, Patrick. They're about evidence and argument.
I know. It was a Stephen Colbert reference. I mean, it's like, it's not that serious.
Okay, so I went ahead because you couldn't find the phone number for the show, which, by the way, for everybody listening, if you go to atheist-experience.com, there's a section there that says, how do I call the show? And it has the number, which, by the way, if you'd ever seen a clip of the show, the number appears right here. It's up there, I don't know why, how is it that you couldn't find the number?
Your web page is designed pretty pitiful as to whoever designed it needs work.
I understand that, Patrick. Here's the thing. If you couldn't find the phone number for the show, how is it that you found the email address, and how is it that you have any understanding of a God?
Well, I got that from the web page. I didn't see that. I read just about the whole web page. I didn't see the number. I'm sorry if I overlooked it, but that's not what this debate is about at any rate.
Okay, what's this debate about? What is it that you called in?
This debate is about atheists and God and that sort of thing, I thought.
Well, you're the one who emailed us to basically accuse us of cowardice for not, engaging you. So what is it that you called in to defend?
Well, what I believe is I'm an agnostic deist, or more like a pantheist, so.
Want to throw another one in there too, just for good measure?
Yeah, But seriously, though,
Patrick, I'm having a hard time. Patrick, I'm having a hard time taking you serious. Having a hard time taking you seriously at all. From both your first message to your snarky responses, what is it that you believe and wanted to actually debate about?
Well, my concept of God is that God is the universe and everything in it. We are all the parts, organs, cells. That kind of thing.
Why call that? Why call that God?
What's that?
Why would you call the universe God? It's already got a label.
That's a pantheistic view. If you know anything about pantheism,
I know things about pantheism, panentheism, deism. What I'm wondering, can you just tell me what the hell it is that you believe and why, so that we might be able to have this discussion?
Well, I believe God is beyond our scope. How can I define being beyond definition?
So you believe in
scope?
something that you cannot define.
Exactly.
Bye.
Why?
No, I said goodbye.
No, but I'm wondering, why do you believe in something that you
Bye-bye.
can't understand?
I apologize. There's no way I could possibly take Patrick seriously. From his initial email that wrote in to, call me and debate me if you have the balls to have a real discussion about God, to I've wiped the floor with so many atheists and they keep telling me to call you and set them straight. By the way, to my atheist friends around the world, if you engage with somebody who is this confused, don't recommend them to call the show. I believe in something, but it's beyond our ability to define.
And why does it take balls to listen to his definition of God as being the universe? I don't get it.
Yeah. Hey, God is this bottle of Coke Zero, which they should be paying for me now as often as Coke Zero. Coke, get off your ass and start sponsoring the show, because we do this all the time. But
wow. That's Patrick.
I told you, Stampy's crazy.
He's a crazy dude, man.
I thought he made a good point.
Yeah.
He made a good point when he said, I believe in something that I don't understand or I can't define. I mean, when you look at the universe, we don't know everything there is to know about the universe. We have trouble understanding it. We have trouble defining it, and yet we believe in it because we perceive it. So in that respect, I don't know why Dillahunty was, making fun of him saying what he said. Apart from, maybe when it comes to God, the God concept, maybe there are grounds to say why believe in something that you don't understand. But, you can have an experience of what you think is God, and you can try to explain why that means God communicating with you. But you can still say, I have no explanation for that experience, or or to me, it was so impressive that by my own definition of God, that is God to me. And I think sometimes with these shows, you can't help but engage in a game of semantics, and especially with Matt Dillahunty, they have a way of trying to manipulate the meaning of words, and and then they use it to try and
And there's
mock
other subtle
their
things like
cause. Yeah.
meaning and interpretations. All that stuff is subjective. So where one person looks at the universe, they may see a cold, dead, innate, meaningless, terrifying, mysterious thing. Whereas another person looks at it and will ascribe awe and, wow, it's beautiful. Even in all its chaos, it's a beautiful system. It's very understandable.
That's an interpretation.
It's right. That's what I'm getting at.
The thing is, what's the difference? What's the difference, right, between someone like Patrick saying, I believe in God, but I can't explain it, and Matt Dillahunty saying, well, I believe in the universe because that's what I see in my own perception. I perceive the universe. And by the way, consciousness is only an illusion. So how can Matt Dillahunty even be sure about what he thinks he knows? That's the thing.
He's an heuristic. He likes to argue for the sake of arguing.
And he makes his living that way.
And he does have a pretty good vocabulary. But, I mean, it's just like, I actually, damn it, him and, what was his name? Aaron Ra?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We tried setting up I just wanted to know why that they were all theists, they're both whatever preachers or something at some point in time. I don't remember the whole backstory, but I was like, why did you give this up and become state worshipers? Boy, they never would make a point on this. They would never bring me on. Oh well, that's fair enough. It's their show.
You see, Al, the atheists, they have this God-sized hole they have to fill in.
Agreed.
And they have to fill it in with something. So for some, it's the state. For other, it's witches and baby eating. Gives you hope,
Yeah.
meaning, and purpose.
Apparently so. I don't understand why people just can't, if you want to go so far to say believe, but I'll just fine, believe in yourself.
Well, the thing about belief for me has always been a little bit problematic, only because what kind of belief are we talking about? Like, there's intellectual belief and then there's embodied beliefs. So it's like, I can say I don't believe in free will, but every day I'm making choices that I think are my free will choices. It's like
You feel free.
I'm acting on this belief of free will. I might as well say I believe in free will if I'm acting on it, some might say. But then I know to myself that intellectually I see some problems with it, right? At least in this libertarian free will
Well,
sense or whatever.
anybody, if you examine it long enough, can find a problem in anything. Okay.
Right.
But
True.
yeah, I don't get this about the atheist shits. They, it's just they're like a different side of the same coin when it comes to like Orthodox religion and state worshiping atheism. Call them out on it, and they will violently attack you.
Well, I feel like that like like I think you, Scott, you mentioned it earlier. It's like they bring their religious fundamentalism with them when they stop believing.
Absolutely, yeah. When it comes to Matt Dillahunty, he never stopped being religious. He just traded one religion for another. That's all it's.
And it's always on the basis.
Hallelujah.
And it's always on the basis of, but you Christians, you believe in, creationism, you believe in talking snakes and sky daddies. But, if you really are real about it, if you at least look at the stats on like Pew Research and things like that, most Christians, at least in America, they believe in evolution. They don't believe in talking snakes. They don't believe in any of that crazy stuff. Most people that call themselves Christians in America probably don't even think about it that much. They're probably just people that go to church and and if you press them on it, they'll say, "Yeah, I'm a Christian and I believe what I believe. I think Jesus died for me or whatever." But if you ask the little old lady down at the church, but how do you resolve the problem of evil, or how do you like? They never thought about that. They don't give a shit about stuff like that. Like they don't care.
They got a basic foundation, and thankfully, it's a pretty good one. Morals and ethics and all that, and
their
they're
beliefs
not perfect, but they they try their best to practice it.
Yeah, it reflects who they are. Like, if you're a moral person and you're a pretty good person, then when you become a Christian, you'll probably be a very moral, good Christian. But if you're an asshole that likes to, you're a psycho or something, and then all of a sudden you identify as a Christian, you'll probably be a psycho Christian.
Yeah, Jimmy Swaggart or whoever that guy is.
Yeah, Jimmy Swaggart.
I got the holy water, $20 a bottle. But no, I mean, it's like people have all these different ways of perceiving reality. Patrick is a batshit crazy pantheist. But he's all right guy. He has his moments.
He's funny. He's entertaining.
Oh, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
You like those videos he puts up with him rapping? Like he's always living in. Dude, he lives in one of the most rundown areas down here, dude, and he's bouncing from hotel to hotel just about every day.
Yeah, Caleb.
So he shows you. Yeah, he'll show you videos of himself inside hotel rooms.
Yeah,
like he'll put his hat on and he'll put his microphone and he'll like, right now, check this out, my new song, and he'll start rapping and he'll try to do rap songs.
Stampy. He's just pure entertainment.
He is. He's funny as hell.
But you guys like Caleb Batista, you don't understand. The Panhandle of Florida is like what's that movie, Deliverance?
Yeah, it's like that.
Dude, there are
The deliverance,
some
yeah.
strange fucking people in there. There's some outposts, like Scott is in Pensacola, and then there's, I think, Destin's the only other
Destin's nice, yeah.
decent place. But everything else out there, man, it's like, don't
Redneck
go there unless
Riviera.
you're with a local.
Dude, one time, I'll tell you a story real quick. I used to be married to a African woman, right? And I had
Poor thing.
my daughter. My daughter, she was like about 4 years old at the time. And anyways, I was just got a job here in Destin, and my boss, he lived in one of those really outwood, places, And he says, "Yeah, I'm having my daughter's birthday. Why don't you bring your family?" He never met. I mean, I was like maybe my third day there. He's like, "Yeah, I'm inviting all our coworkers to come out and have fun." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." He says, "So bring your wife. You have a child, you said? Cool." I was like, "Yeah, I didn't think none of it." Well, they didn't know that my wife was African. So when I showed up, they were like, "What the hell?" And the guy comes out, he's got like these overalls on. He's like this big redneck. He's got this big old cowboy hat on, and he's got this, and he comes out there and he goes, "Where are you from, girl?" And she's like, "I'm from Africa." And he looks around, everybody goes, "So now I'm in fucking Africa now?" Like that. and, then,
Jesus.
and then he walks in the house, and then his wife said, "Oh, don't listen to him. He's just a grumpy old man."
That's right.
And then we get in the backyard, and they have like this blow up swimming pool, like this little redneck swimming pool. And they got all their kids in there, and Dave, my boss, goes, "Yeah, did I told you to bring a bathing suit for your daughter if she wants to go swimming?" I'm like, "Yeah, she's got one." So my mom, my ex-wife, she put the bathing suit on my daughter, and everybody was in the pool. Then my wife was carrying the baby and puts her in the pool. Man, everybody just got out of that pool. Every one of them, they just got out, and she was the only one in the pool. And my wife said, "What's wrong?" And then this lady says, "Well, there ain't no way I'm gonna let my daughter be in the same pool with some N word,
Oh
And
my
I was like,
goodness.
"What the hell?" And then,
Yeah.
anyways, by the end
Well,
of the
you
day,
shut
we were
down,
all
you say
getting
that.
along. They loved her to death because she was really a good sport about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
Well,
she
she's
didn't
an
care.
African. She's not
Yeah,
one of these
right,
animals that local homegrown ones.
right. Because I'm telling you, if these black people, especially around here in this area, it'd be on. Like, there's a lot of big racial tension going on. Anyways, she
Well,
was
Florida's-
cool with it, and
It's like
Florida's
apartheid.
one
They still had the
extreme to the
apartheid
other.
mentality.
yeah,
it
big time.
It
I
reminds me
forget
of
what is that town up there in the north of the UK, Welsh or something like that. The people are just batshit crazy. Or is that just Scotland?
That's Scotland, and then you have Wales on the side. Yeah.
Florida's
I think
about
Welsh
the same.
people tend to be the most backwards. At least so the stereotype goes. But there you go.
Yeah, it's like the further south you go, the more civil it is.
it reminds me
I've met some decent Welsh people. So
of the you guys know of Trevor Noah used to
Yeah.
host the Daily Show. It's like
Heard of him, yeah.
he told me, or he said that it's like when he first came here and someone tried to call him the N-word, and he just started laughing because it's like, that's meaningless to me. It's like,
Yeah, it doesn't mean right.
It's fun though. People got their ways about them, and I don't know.
The good thing
forget
that
the one guy on YouTube. They had all these black YouTubers go interview him. I think he was titled "The Most Racist Man in America."
yeah, I saw that.
He was funny.
He was. That was hilarious. Anyways, guy, I'm gonna go ahead and get off here. We're at the 3-hour mark. I got some stuff I got to do, but it was great, man. I'm glad you guys participated, answered the questions, and made the show lively, man. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. So until next
thank you,
weekend.
Scott.
Yes,
Thanks,
sir.
guys.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good day.
Yep,
too.
y'all
You too, man.
don't blow yourself up with them leftover fireworks.
There you go. I'll be missing another finger later on, guys.
See
Take
ya.
care.
All right.